FM. We're also in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Shane and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with the chat, tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make this show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. Mike Gravel died, 91 years old. The man was an icon. And I know I mentioned this yesterday, but there was so much content from the standpoint of the UFO report that basically took priority over pretty much everything else, at least in my mind, considering the gravity of that report and what it means going forward. The UFO community, like I said, wasn't necessarily ecstatic with the report, even though, like I said, I was over the moon. And there were several people who had been in the field for a very long time that was over the moon because they got the gravity. They got the paradigm shift. Even if it hasn't necessarily been internalized yet, it is there nonetheless. For example, because of the paradigm shift, because you now have a report saying that it is real, this is a flat fact reality, there's a there, and as such, government, media, and everything else will conform to that new reality of things. We haven't even gotten into repercussions. What does it mean for the Department of Defense to have dropped the ball so radically for so long? The report constrained itself for maybe 10 years or more, but this stuff has gone back for decades. And the report and the document and the responses that came out from people who were behind the scenes, who could see it and read the evidence, they came out with a certain assessment of the things that people have been reporting over the years were indeed accurate. We were engaging advanced aircraft that we couldn't necessarily ascertain its intent or how it did into things that it did. They were outpacing our own craft. Our military personnel weren't crazy. The decades where those people were being castigated and having to keep the information to themselves and being ridiculed, the years where those people were being destroyed, those people were telling the truth. It's not that everything that they encountered was an alien craft. That's not really the point. The point that people try to make is that there was a there, and that there was continuously ignored, downplayed, and even, in some cases, attacked, or at the very least, the people who are coming out. The report is nothing short of a paradigm shift. That's what I'm getting at. It's not that this is what it is. It's the fact that there is a there in the first place, which for the last 70 years was not true. New world. Rubio. For years, the men and women we trust to defend our country reported encounters of unidentified aircraft with superior capabilities. For years, their concerns were often ridiculed and ignored. It's not just Rubio saying, look, I've seen the classified documents. This is real. What these people are seeing is real. They're dealing with technology that is more advanced than our own. That's astonishing. Rubio is basically bolstering what has taken place over the last several decades. And again, if that is indeed true, then it is a monumental intelligence failure. We just haven't gotten around to asking the Defense Department to explain yourself. Explain what government around the world that you believe has this advanced capability. Explain how they were able to get this advanced capability. We spend $1 trillion on the military. We spend like 9 times more than the next people. Explain their path of leapfrogging us. And that's just the $1 trillion that we know of. We haven't even talking about black budget stuff. Explain what government is it? Is it Russia? Is it China? Was it Russia and China back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s when this stuff was taking place? You have a lot of explaining to do. The fact that this is reality, I don't even have to deal with whether or not it's real. That's been established. We're into the point of what is it? How is it doing what it's doing? What is the physics? What is the mechanics? Is it disruptive and breakthrough technology? What is it? And how did the government around the world, and what government around the world do you believe is using it? They're questions that need to be answered. Now, the UFO community should be ecstatic about this. It's not just Rubio. Nelson, NASA comes out. I've seen the background. I don't think we might not be alone in the universe. Not just Rubio and Nelson. We have Ratcliffe. Let's play the clip for Ratcliffe.
Look, the bottom line is with unidentified aerial phenomenon, many cases, Dan, we're able to explain it away for reasons like visual disturbances or weather phenomenon or foreign adversaries and their technologies, or even our own experimental technologies with certain aircraft and vehicles. But what this report really underscores, Dan, is that that there are a number of instances, and the specific number remains classified, but a number of instances where we've ruled all of that out. And there are technologies that we don't have, and frankly, that we're not capable of defending against based on those things that we've seen, multiple sensors. In other words, where not just people visually see it, but where it's picked up on radar, where it's seen on satellites. And so, it's an issue of national security. And as the person who was informing policymakers about national security threats, it's not good to say, gosh, we don't have good answers. And so we have to have a larger discussion to try and figure out specifically, what this is all about. So I'm glad that information's out.
That former director of national intelligence, Radcliffe, he said that after the report came out, Rubio's statement came out immediately after the report came out. And I'm telling you, Rubio's statement had to be picked over because Rubio was not going to put out this statement that was going to be historic if each and every word in the statement wasn't validated or could be backed up. He's a political actor. It's not just Rubio. It's not just Ratcliffe. It's not just Nelson from NASA. It's also Mitt Romney. Let's play this clip.
Intelligence just a few days ago released a new report on 144 sightings of what they call unidentified aerial phenomena. Virtually all of them remain unexplained. Whatever these are, they appear to not only be technology that the United States does not have, but technology that we cannot even explain. I know a lot of people joke about this, but you're a national security hawk. How concerned are you about these objects, and where do you think they come from?
Well, I don't believe they're coming from foreign adversaries. If they were, why, that would suggest that they have a technology which is in a whole different sphere than anything we understand. And frankly, China and Russia just aren't there. And either are we, by the way. So I'm not worried about it from a national security standpoint.
Stop right there for a second.
If for some reason...
Stop right there. Did you hear what he said? I hope you heard what he said. That, yes, I accept this as reality because at this point it is reality. We already know it's reality. No, I don't believe it's from China and Russia. And so I don't think it's a big deal from a national security standpoint. Wait, stop. What? You just said that you accept the reality of this, Mitt Romney, but it's not from China and Russia. His point being that if it was from China and Russia, I would be concerned. But I think this is where the Department of Defense was. If it was from China and Russia, we'd be concerned. We don't think it is. Hence Romney's statement, I don't think it's a national security issue. But the radical uncuriosity of Romney in this moment misses what he just said and the gravity of what he just said. My point is that this is legit. This is real. The classified, I have no idea what's in the classified, but various people who've been looking at this has been coming out with a particular assessment. That's my point. For the people who are in the community, you may not be aware of who Mike Gravel is. Mike Gravel was the guy who read out the Pentagon Papers in Congress. There's a quirk in our laws that if somebody, there's a procedure associated with it, but a congressional member can read classified information in Congress and be protected by it. Again, it's a little procedural stuff, but it's doable. I know it's doable because Mike Gravel did it. Daniel Ellsberg was going to be put into a cage because Daniel Ellsberg released the Pentagon Papers. Now, Ellsberg has come into the news recently because Ellsberg has made the point about our policy towards China in regards to Taiwan, meaning the potential of using nuclear weapons. This was back then. In order to defend Taiwan against China. Ellsberg's point is, pay attention to what your intelligence state is doing. It is insane at times. Well, this is one of those cases where I kind of want to bring up because Gravel has just passed. Gravel was an icon, especially from the standpoint of the left, especially from the standpoint of being anti-war, very strong. And Gravel did what I think a lot of you want to take place now. Meaning you want to know what's behind the scenes. And some of you are unsatisfied because you want to know what's behind the scenes. You want to know what Romney is talking about. You want to know what Rubio is talking about. You want to know what Nelson is talking about. You want to know what Ratcliffe is talking about. You want to know what the CIA guys, when they're talking about the stuff behind the scenes, you want to know what they're talking about. Yes or no. FOIA is not going to give it to you. Is it possible, however, you can get a member of Congress that believes in the issue, that believes that America needs to be told the truth, that goes out and pulls a Gravel? I guess I'm saying this on some level in memory of Gravel, but I'm also pointing out that there are potentials and there are opportunities for this to come out. I don't believe for a moment that is going to happen. I think this is going to be a slow, desensitizing process that when the moment is finally clear from one report, one hearing after the next, inexorably leading to the particular point of saying, okay, it's not China and Russia. But before you get to that process, it's going to be slow and plodding. That said, it doesn't necessarily mean that the opportunity is not there for a member of Congress to do what Gravel did. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We're going to be back with Ted Rall, and we're going to have a conversation on the politics that is taking place in regards to the infrastructure and the budget reconciliation bill and the backstepping on that. Fault Lines, Thomas and Stranahan.
Fault Lines.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Want to know how international issues fit into local ones and how local issues fit into international ones? With the historical context to tie them together, we're bringing it to you all by any means necessary. Tune in weekdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to hear me, Jackie Lukman, alongside my co-host Sean Blackman. By any means necessary, your guide to connecting the social, political, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host is not all that well today, so I am here by myself. However, we're going to have various guests. One in particular who's coming on now is Ted Rall. Ted Rall is a political cartoonist and syndicated columnist. And Ted, thank you for the short notice. Thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Jamal. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. So I would like to talk about democratic politics. And maybe I shouldn't even call it democratic politics. I should call it politics of America and whether or not the political instrument cares anything for the American public. Now, Biden is coming out with an infrastructure plan. And there's all sorts of politics around this plan that is not entirely and completely related to this plan. What I mean by that is budget reconciliation. So Biden comes out with 10 Republicans that says, okay, we're going to make a deal. And yes, we're going to have to make this deal. We're going to strip it to this core in order to make the deal. However, we have another package that we're going to push through budget reconciliation using only Democrats. Now, Republicans look at this and say, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't these be tied together? Meaning you get this weird spot where they say, all right, if you're going to pass this infrastructure package and you're going to get 10 of us, well, if you're going to use budget reconciliation for that, well, maybe we don't want to join in with us. And Biden has to is being submissive as he's being bullied because he wants to make the deal to look bipartisan. Basically, he's tethering himself to the lowest common denominator, a Republican that will make a deal with him, which means the deal will always be dramatically unsatisfying. Like, it's like, what on earth? Like, this is like what's frustrating about politics. Biden comes in and there's all of this talk about FDR. And not just that, even if you take out the FDR stuff, the moment that you say, okay, we're going to spend money on, we've had 600,000 people to die. We are going to invest in America. And then it becomes, okay, Biden, how are you going to do that? And when you find out at one step of the way, whether it is lacking in temperament, lacking in specific intent, meaning basically just lied during the campaign, or just not having the physical vigor or capability of doing any of it. Like, do you know how dispiriting that is? Like, for me, I didn't vote for Biden because I didn't believe that Biden was going to do any of that stuff. But the idea that these guys are getting stuck when they have the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and he is still tethering himself to the whims of the Republican Party. Ted, first, am I articulating it right? Is there anything of that you disagree with? And on the other part of it, comments. What are your thoughts?
Jamal, I agree with your characterization in general. I think, first of all, it's a little bit of each of those factors that you mentioned. I would also say it's sort of the inability of Biden and the Democrats to play the kind of conning hardball that Republicans do, as in, this is just an example that popped up to me when I was listening to you, as in when, Mitch McConnell said, well, we have this new rule where we don't approve Supreme Court nominees.
Right.
It's like I pulled out of, where.
Yeah.
And so that was the kind of thing that Biden was attempting there, right? It was like, well, we'll do it in two bills, and we got you guys to be bipartisan on the half that you guys agreed to, and now we're going to do it on our own.
Right. It's that.
Oh, we can't do that. Now you're mad. And it's like, well, of course, when the Republicans don't care when the Democrats got mad about the Supreme Court thing. They didn't care at all.
Didn't care one iota.
And they went on vacation, right? When the going gets tough, the tough go to Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, they didn't care one iota. Like, it's very strange. It's always weird to me. And so when I look at it, I think to myself, okay, is this bias that ingrained where it's like we need to compromise regardless of whatever? Or is it we're going to compromise because this is really who we are? And you may have these lefties and everything else that are complaining and everything else, but at the end of the day, we're compromising because this is basically who we are. Like, to me, and Shane says I can be too hard about stuff like this. I think the negotiation would have been over whether to keep the filibuster or not. That's the fight. Meaning, yes, you guys can try to block my agenda, but if you do, this is going away. Now, the threat for Democrats is always, oh, well, but we're going to need the filibuster. And I try to make the point that the filibuster is not a real defense. Like, if you're living on the filibuster, like, okay, when things go bad, we're going to have it. No, you're not. Because the very fact that we're having the conversation right now means it can go away in a heartbeat, which means it's not a real protection. That seems to be where the fight should have been, or that seems to be where the threat should have been. You guys fall in line or else this goes away. Is that too strong?
I don't think it is too strong. And by the way, parenthetically, there is a place to get rid of the filibuster that I think would achieve a lot of bipartisan, not in Washington, but among the voters.
Yeah.
And that would be to insist on a non-parliamentary filibuster. In other words, you have to go like Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
Yes, agreed.
Filibuster. You do have to talk. You have to read the phone book and the Bible or whatever you're doing. So there is still an option for a senator who is willing to forego bathroom breaks. Really go. And if you really feel it, you put your mouth where your money is, right? But that's not how.
Well, see, they wanted the lazy way out.
There's something about the parliamentary filibuster where you just file a piece of paperwork and then there's a filibuster. That's not a filibuster.
Yeah, that's not a filibuster. No, I want the guy to stand up. I want the guy that is so fervently believing in his principles that he gets a catheter in his penis with a thing that just records it so he can just stand there for like 20 hours. That's what I want. Because at that point, I'm like, wow, that guy means it. That guy feels it. Because at that point, you know it, right? It's like nobody is going to stand there like that for no reason. And the moment that, the Republicans are complaining about voting, right? It's like, oh, we made voting too easy. Well, you guys made the filibuster too easy. You guys made the filibuster too easy. And in doing so, by destroying this notion of one-track filibuster, where initially it was one track, you didn't have these kind of multiple things where you could go. Like, they destroyed all concept of the filibuster, where you've just made a body that was already a minority-oriented body that much more powerful to basically stop any notion of politics. I try to make the point to people that if this was in any other country, they would have dissolved the government by now.
That's true.
Because nothing gets done.
There would have been a vote of parliamentary vote of no confidence. And the government, definitely, it would have been, that would have happened many times over. I'm working on a column this week that's probably going to go up today, actually, where I was literally just decided, it was a slow news week, sort of, except for the fact that apparently space aliens are here. I just decided, like, well, what exactly are the polls saying are, like, Americans' top worry right now, right? What is So I looked it up, right? Pew says, as of April 15th, most recent, 56% of Americans say that they are extremely worried about the high cost of health care.
Yeah.
Then another 24% say they're pretty worried about it. So 80% of Americans are worried about health care. It's their number one issue. It's the only issue that more than half say they're very worried about. And I looked at this historically, going back 10 years to when the ACA passed. It hasn't changed. It's gone up or down 1 or 2 points here and there, but it hasn't changed. It's been 80%. So in other words, the ACA has not solved this problem.
It's failed.
Well, what are the two parties, saying about this? Well, the Republicans don't have any plan at all. They had repeal and replace. The Supreme Court, decision puts the kibosh on that. But the Democrats basically boil down to, well, we're leaving the ACA. And nothing was going to change. There will be no public, nothing will necessarily change. There will be no public option, nothing.
Basically, they lied. Basically, they lied.
The only proposal that they have, sort of, is a 4-sentence proposal to reduce the eligibility age for Medicare from 60 to 60, but then they're not even going to do that. So that's it. So it's like, I'm literally like, no wonder, this is my long-winded way of saying, no wonder Americans hate politicians.
Yes.
I mean, the number one concern they have when they wake up in the morning is, I don't know if I can afford to see a doctor or go to the hospital or send my kid to the doctor or take care of my father if he needs to go to a nursing home.
I mean, Ted, and it makes sense, right? 33,607,895 people were infected with COVID in this country. This country does not have universal health care, which means that all of those people are going to have to deal with medical bills. That's assuming that many of those people aren't already dead, since 600,000 are already dead. So it's like, yeah, of course. And yet, that's not the news, if that makes sense. And it's weird that that's not the news, considering that that's where the public is. And then you start asking this question, okay, well, what does news mean in the first place? And if it's not what's in line with what the public wants or public interest, then what is it? I mean, because it's a really good fact. I'm glad you brought that up, because it means that the political instrument and the media instrument are entirely out of sorts in regards to what the public is even interested in.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you look at the list of issues that people care about the most, for example, gun violence is like number 2 and number 3, right? One is like street crime versus gun violence. Again, there's just no action in Washington at all. There isn't even really lip service. So, and I think when people ask themselves, well, how could the people have voted for Donald Trump? And, 2016. It's like, well, because he didn't do anything about these problems, but he at least talked about them. For example, like deindustrialization and NAFTA, he talked about them. And that for people who had never felt seen before, that was a big thing. Whoever figures out how to see the voter. Wait, we're not talking about all disadvantaged people here, right? I mean, I can't afford health care. I need a colonoscopy. I can't afford it. It's going to be like $7,000 out of pocket.
But here's the difference.
No?
Both political parties and the media space are basically in the same class. And as such, it's almost as if they just say, these aren't things that we're concerned about. So these things are just off the table from the standpoint of conversation and discussion. And so Jake Tapper is not worried about getting health care. So Jake Tapper is not going to focus on health care as a major issue. Just like the political parties and the political leaders. Joe Biden, Obamacare, that's a Democrat creation. They're not going to attack it. They're not going to attack it. And even this notion of expanding it, meaning if you started off with 80% of the public being concerned about healthcare after you pass your healthcare plan, and it stays that way, then your healthcare plan has failed. It didn't do what you put it there to do, which was to alleviate the concerns of the public in regards to healthcare. It wasn't there for theatrics. It was supposed to be there because people had concerns about whether or not they could afford and pay for their health care. And this is something that is pertinent to the individual because it deals with their body and their self. And here's a plan that's supposed to deal with that. And it doesn't. And you get COVID, and it makes it that much more clear that it doesn't. And it's like, and it's angering and dispiriting on some level. Like, I often make the point that if those people who ran there at the Capitol screaming, Trump, Trump, Trump was screaming, where's our health care? You let us off of a cliff. All of these businesses that went belly up. I can't pay my, et cetera, et cetera. I can't pay my rent. That's different. And yet that's not what we had. And, you could, and maybe it's this notion that, look, this stuff doesn't look clean. Meaning the Black Lives Matter protest, is it experience of that of sorts, because you have people who are black, white, gay, straight, etc. It wasn't just blacks who were out there. And it seems to be that those protests were almost extensions of Sanders in a weird way, where it's like, are you willing to fight for somebody in the way you did fight for yourself? And then these people saying, yes, we are, and running out there and yelling at cops. And then you get the other Trump stuff. And you think to yourself, okay, but are these things expressions of a higher or a deeper, I don't know what to call it, a deeper frustration in society, a deeper animosity that is basically geared towards the political instrument? I mean, when the people are out there screaming in protest, that is against the political instrument, whether it's being an expression of cops or whatever else, it's against the state. Just like when the people ran on the Capitol, that was against the state. Both of those things, on some level, showed a certain animosity. The catch becomes if the state wasn't as bad as this, meaning like because I think it makes the point acute. 600,000 people have dropped dead. And of course, people's concern are going to be healthcare. But that is not what they care about. That is not what they're even pushing around. Public option is off the table, despite the fact that Biden said he was going to pass the public option because he's not going to forward Medicare for all. It's just wild. It's almost a radical degree to which the public and public concerns are completely and entirely ignored. It's astonishing.
The public definitely, it is. I mean, I'd say that this is it's dispiriting, but that dispiritingosity has led to something very optimistic for me, which is that there is an awareness that this is the government's fault and that this is political class's fault. I mean, it's in contrast that with, for example, soldiers on the Eastern Front thought that Hitler didn't know that they were poorly equipped.
That's right. That's right.
If the Fuhrer knew about this crap, boy, would he be pissed. Some generals would really be in trouble. Of course he knew all about it. We don't have that problem. People do know who their enemy is and who's neglecting them and who's not taking care of them when they should. And so every time they pay their taxes every year or every quarter, they know that, they feel that growing resentment. And you can just feel the pressure building year after year after year. And it ebbs and flows, but it's overall just, January 6th was a paroxysm. But there will be more January 6th.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's not clean. And what I mean by, and let me explain what I mean by that. I just mean, it's not Americans, black, white, gay, straight, everything in between, coming together saying, we can't pay our rent. We can't get our food. We're having difficulty from COVID. We have all of these medical bills, and raiding the Capitol doing that. It's not that. Because that's harder to attack, to be honest. Because that's dealing with something that's directly related to the public, and that's directly related to you guys have utterly and entirely failed. No, you don't get that. You get this stuff cut in the lens that people understand it. And so you get Trump. And I keep making the point to people that Trump doesn't exist without failure. Meaning the January 6th stuff is an extension of the previous failure of the political instrument. You can try to blame Trump, but Trump would not be, honestly, if you think about it, does Donald Trump ever make it into a political space without the political space having failed so thoroughly that people think Donald Trump is a valuable element? I think the answer is no. And so it's not, it's basically we're paying for things. We're paying for things. Donald Trump is payment, basically, for not being able to get our affairs in order. And Biden gets in office with another chance to do it, and he fails, or he's failing monstrously. And he's doing so under this banner of bipartisanship, as if that's the point. Pitt, let's do this. Let's take a break, and I'm going to bring you back. And we can continue with this conversation, or we can get into a further conversation in regards to foreign policy and what we are doing and Biden attacking other countries. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. The voice that you guys are listening to is Ted Rall. Ted Rall is a political cartoonist and syndicated columnist. We will be back in a moment.
Fault Lines.
What do we want?
News, politics, and culture.
When do we want it?
Wait, we weren't finished. News, politics, and culture without the red and blue spin.
Okay, so now when do you want it?
Daily from noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, satisfied now?
Never. Tune into Political Misfits on 105.5 FM in Washington, D.C. and on 102.9 and 104.7 FM in Kansas City, Missouri. Daily for our analytical fix. No surrender.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Shane. Well, my co-host is not feeling well today, so I am joined entirely by myself, or for that matter, with Ted Rawl. Ted Rawl is a political cartoonist and syndicated columnist. You can follow Ted on Twitter at Ted Rawl and read his cartoons at rawl.com. Ted, again, thank you for joining me, man. I appreciate it. I always enjoy these conversations, so thank you.
Me too. Thank you.
I want to get into, for the moment, Mike Gravel. Mike Gravel, strong lefty. And, you know, I would imagine you've been in the political space for a while. And, you know, you've seen Mike Gravel over the years and everything else. Mike Gravel has been in politics for God knows how long. I asked my wife, I said, Gravel died. She says, really? And I said, you don't know who Gravel is. She said, he's the guy that threw the rock in the water. I mean, the rock into the water. I said, yeah, that's the guy. I said, that's him. Do you have anything to say about that? I mean, this is just bringing it up. I mean, more so and just asking if you have any commentary on the fact that, you know, either his life, the passing, or anything about Gravel in general. I mean, it's not something that I originally thought up. It was past the picture, and I thought I'd just ask.
Well, I mean, sort of more generally, I think there's something very, you know, like lefties die in the woods and they don't make a sound in our political culture. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably what will happen to me, you know. I think about like Howard Zinn died.
Yeah.
And I remember Bob Herbert, the columnist for the New York Times at the time, wrote sort of a remembrance talking about how he frequently dined with Zinn. And I remember thinking, wait, you are a columnist at the New York Times? You're friends with Zinn? How come you never gave him a shout out in your column and ever said like, hey, so Zinn said the other day over dinner? Or how come you never said, oh, Zinn has a new book that you should read? And it's like, because, I mean, it's kind of like a dirty secret, like sort of between the sort of relationship between the actual left and sort of the liberals who populate mainstream media. Is they know us, they like us, they probably respect us, they'd almost like to be us, but they like their paychecks better, and they're worried that if they say anything about us, that it'll somehow seem untoward. It's not like anyone tells them not to.
Yeah,
they get a memo. They just sort of know it's in the air. So anyway, So I think there's something really sort of noble and, as you would say, dispiriting about, you know, sort of a life lived like that that's going to end in somewhat obscurity, even though it shouldn't, because it's a life well lived.
But is it? I mean, yeah, noble, yes, in a way, kind of. I mean, I always say, you know, nobility or this stuff. I always say that stuff doesn't exist. But on some level, I mean, yeah. In Gravel's case, though, I mean, regardless of how I think people saw his life, I think he looked at it as, what do I think is right? And what can I accomplish within the context of what I think is right? I think it's that. And that's not easy, because you're always put to challenge with one thing after the next that pulls you away. Like you said, because I think from the liberal standpoint, they would say, oh, it's pragmatic. That's the way they would look at it, or they would call it. I have to take this money, which means I can't do that. And you guys keep attacking us to try to get us to do these things that we can't do. I mean, I think it's a very weird conversation when you see like the left, and then you get the limo left, the quote unquote pragmatic left, as they call themselves, that can't get anything done. It's very wild. It's something that you mentioned that I wasn't going to bring up, but you mentioned it. I think you went to it first. You were saying you turned around and all of a sudden there were UFOs. What do you think about the report that came out? I don't know if you've read the report. What do you think about it? Because this just got dropped into our media space over the last 5 years like a bomb. And that report basically has just said, you know, all that stuff that we said wasn't real, it's real. And it's tech. And Romney is interesting, because Romney's answer was, well, look, it's not China and Russia, meaning it's advanced tech, yes. We don't know what it is, yes. We can't defend against it, no. But it's not national security issue because it's not China and Russia. And it's like, whoa, what did you just say? Like, I hope you understand what I mean, like the gravity of what Romney had just said. So I'll leave it to you. Like, what are your thoughts on it? Are you just like, no, dude, this is just for military budget? What are your thoughts?
First of all, I want to just point out what the report does not talk about, which is civilian sightings of UFOs, right?
Correct.
It only addresses military personnel.
And only constrained to for a certain number of years.
Right. So therefore, look, this is the tip of the iceberg, basically. And, there's considerable documentary film evidence and other, this is hard data. And yeah, I've read the report several times. I thought it was fascinating. I will admit to being interested in this topic and in general. And I read it the way you did, Jamarl. I mean, it's like, look, so it's not U.S. intel. It's not U.S. technology. It's not Russia or China. It's no one else that we know of terrestrial. We don't know what it is, but I mean, come on. You don't have to have taken logic and rhetoric,
right?
In order.
It's that, right? Like it's right. So the UFO community looked at this report and was like, it's unsatisfying. I got on my channel and I was like, oh my God, you're in a new world. Because basically, if you think about it, for 70 years, they've said this is swamp gas. And the government has taken explicit steps to say there's no there. So science, academia, all of that stuff said, okay, well, the government says, oh, there. Okay, fair enough. But now you've just been told, no. There is a there. That the pilots have been seeing this stuff. And then you have people like Rubio or people like Nelson for NASA, who's like, yeah, I've seen the classified stuff. I don't think we're alone. Or Elizondo, who's ran the ATIP program, who basically said, I don't think it's us. He's very clear. I don't think it's Russia and China. And he goes into explaining why he doesn't. He was like, the Soviet Union fell. We saw what was in their books. This stuff was happening back then. China wasn't in a position to have the technology back then to even do it. And we don't have the position to even know what it is now. That's the overt, right? And so it's like you say, this is just the military, and this is just constrained a few years. This hasn't even got into civilian stuff. We had Kariakou on here yesterday. Kariakou told me something that blew my mind. Because the report is out now, and because this is now what the report is screaming for people to give their stories, meaning they want people to report their sightings within 2 weeks. That's how significant this is. They created an X-Files division the moment the report came out. The Department of Defense created an X-Files division where all of the information and everything else needs to be correlated and to formalize the collection process of that information. We're in a new world. And so you get that. We haven't even gotten to the questions of like, whoa, what did the Department of Defense know and when did they know it? And what did they do to people in order to keep the secret? We haven't even gotten there yet. We're still in a, wow, we're still there. Wait, something was in our military installations? Did you guys not do anything to prevent that? Did you try to do anything to prevent it? What steps did you do to prevent it? Were you not concerned about that? I mean, the fact that it's advanced tech didn't bother you? Did you alert the president? Did you alert Congress? All sorts of questions flow from this. I mean, it's just an astonishing topic that we are, meaning 5 years ago, this is unseen or unforeseeable, if that makes sense.
Totally. Well, I mean, I was telling some friends, there's really only two news stories that matter right now: climate change and the UFO report. I mean, because one calls into question whether human beings will continue to exist.
Yes.
And the other one calls into question what it means to be human.
Yes. Are we alone in the universe? What it means to be in general. Like it's I don't think people get the gravity of this, Ted.
It's a massive thing. And the thing is, what I'm really looking forward to hearing from is not really, the guy who was drinking too much and thinks he saw a flashing object and was abducted, from the country road. I'm interested in the civilian pilots who for years, who are many ex-military, very sober, scientifically minded people who have obviously been seeing these things for years. I mean, reading between the lines, what I kind of get is the reason this did not really shock people in the know at the Pentagon is because it was an open secret there. And
yes.
Going on, basically Navy pilots, Air Force pilots have been seeing this stuff frequently. And if you flew enough, you were going to see it. And you sort of accepted it, and it was like, wow, that's interesting.
I think it's like what Mitt Romney said.
About it.
I think it's like what Mitt Romney said. And it's very weird to me I don't understand their framing of the world where what Romney said didn't just stop the world, if that makes sense. Because Romney doesn't care about this issue. This isn't something that Romney cares about. He would dismiss it, even as he talks about it, and says things that are astonishing. I think it's because Romney basically said, look, it's not Russia and China. And so, yeah, it's advanced tech. That's true. But it's not a national security issue because it's not Russia or China. It's like, yeah, Romney, you just disclosed we're not alone in the universe. Like, and he doesn't care. It's just very wild. It's just very weird in the way that these guys think about it. That's all.
Yeah, and of course the big question that, assuming that that's true, then of course that brings up the technological question of how did they
get here? Where are they going?
Here, considering the massive distances involved, right?
Ted, we have to end this, man, but this is a fascinating conversation. And yeah, this conversation is going to proceed as it goes on. Ted Rall is a political cartoonist and syndicated columnist. You can follow Ted on Twitter at Ted Rall and read his cartoons and articles at Rall.com. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be back in a moment.
Listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault Lines.
Live from the divided states of America, precipitously perched at the edge of this resilient and exploited cosmos. Welcome to your context lens for the American perspective. In the left corner, I am your ever-vigilant, indefatigable political analyst, Jamarl Thomas, and my empty seat over there is usually filled by one Shane Stranahan. He's not feeling well today. So I will take over that position of being the independent and the right, all corners of this particular room. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. All right, let's get to the headlines. In the news, about 15,570 new COVID cases were reported in the United States yesterday, with about 161 new deaths. Over the past week, there's been an average of about 11,842 cases per day, a decrease of 15% from the average 2 weeks earlier. 46% of the American public has been fully vaccinated. 54% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected 33,607,895 human beings in this country, of 320,000, give or take, and has killed 603,758 mothers, fathers, and children. 11 people have now been confirmed dead from the collapse of the Miami building, and 150 others are still missing. No survivors have been found under the rubble since the morning of the disaster. A poll of San Franciscoans revealed that 70% of the people believe the quality of life in their city has gone down, mentioning problems with crime and homelessness, with a 753% increase in car break-ins over the past 13 months. A key witness in the case against Julian Assange has said he lied about the Assange in exchange for immunity. In a story published on Saturday, the Icelandic newspaper Student quotes the convicted hacker Sergir Thordarson as saying that he misrepresented himself as a more prominent member of WikiLeaks than he actually was, and gave evidence on WikiLeaks that has now been revealed to be fabricated. Fugitive whistleblower Edward Snowden said about the story that Assange case was now over. Makes it that much more tragic, actually. Rebels in Ethiopia's Tigray region have retaken the regional capital of Tigray, Mekelle, as government forces retreated from the city. The Ethiopian government has been harshly criticized and continuously scrutinized for its violent occupation of the Tigray region late last year, following hostilities ramping up with the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. Ethiopia has since called for a unilateral ceasefire in Tigray. South Africa's former leader, Jacob Zuma, has been convicted of a contempt of court in order to serve 15 months in prison after failing to make an appearance on charges of corruption before the country's constitutional court, which one judge said Zuma tried to destroy by conducting a, quote, politically motivated smear campaign, unquote, against the institution. 2 Americans who were charged in a Japanese court with helping Nissan's former chairman, Carlos Ghosn, flee have apologized. Ghosn currently is a fugitive living in Lebanon, which has no extradition treaty with Japan. Ghosn is wanted on charges of financial misconduct and fled Japan inside a box for musical equipment aboard a plane. Those are your headlines. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. All right, so we've been paying attention to the Miami crash. 11 people that have now been confirmed dead. In fact, before we get to that one, I want to get to the Assange thing for a moment, because the Assange thing is made that much worse. So I read this headline right here. A key witness in a case against Julian Assange has said that he lied about Assange in exchange for immunity. In a story published on Saturday, the Icelandic newspaper student quoted the hacker Thordarson as saying that he misrepresented himself as a more prominent member of WikiLeaks than he actually was, and gave evidence on WikiLeaks that has now been shown to be fabricated. Do we have that clip from Democracy Now? Can we play that if you can pull it? Excellent. Let's play the clip from Democracy Now. This is Assange's legal counsel.
This is just the latest revelation of how problematic the United States case is against Julian Assange, and in fact baseless. Of course, as you outlined at the introduction, the evidence from Thordarson that was given to the United States and formed the basis of the second superseding indictment, including allegations of hacking, has now been, on his own admission, demonstrated to have been fabricated. Not only did he misrepresent his access to Julian Assange and to WikiLeaks and his association with Julian Assange, he has now admitted that he made up and falsely misrepresented to the United States that there was any association with WikiLeaks and any association with hacking. So this is just the latest revelation to demonstrate why the US case should be dropped. We have to begin, of course, with the free speech implications. Free speech groups, the Washington Post, the New York Times, mainstream media are unanimously against and have denounced this prosecution as a threat to freedom of speech in the United States. But leaving that aside, the factual basis for this case has completely fallen apart. And we have been calling for this case to be dropped for a very long time. And this is just the latest form of abuse demonstrated in this case that shows why it ought to be dropped.
Yes, that's an understatement. But the case is not about a reality of things. Meaning the case against Julian Assange is not a case in the strictest sense of the way that we would think of a case. Like a person goes, they get a misdemeanor, they go to court, et cetera. The judge is not necessarily trying to be punitive, et cetera, as it prosecutes his way. That's not what this is. This is somewhat of a political prosecution. The case against him was a fig leaf at best. Yes, the fig leaf has fallen off, but the torture of Assange has already happened. It took place over the years where they basically tortured him in broad daylight, and now you're finding the torture to be on a fabricated basis. Yes. It's not, I mean, that's the aggravating part about this case, right? That it was always understood that this was a political prosecution. When Obama was in office, Obama didn't necessarily want to go this far because he understood, or at the very least cared on some level, about what it meant for press freedom in the United States if you're willing to go after a journalist, which is basically what this is. The U.S. feelings were hurt because Assange published information embarrassing the CIA and embarrassing the institutions, and so they wanted to go after him. This became that much more spiteful when it was believed that Assange helped Trump get elected. And so all of this is hurt feelings. None of this has anything to do with the real legitimacy of the case against them, because there is no legitimate case against them, at least not one that you would be able to put against any journalist. Joe Biden, this is Reuters, Justice Department spokesman Mark Grimaldi on Tuesday said that the United States will continue to challenge a British court's ruling last month that Assange should not be extradited to the United States because of risk he would commit suicide. In January 4th ruling, Judge Vanessa Barrister said, quote, "I find that the mental condition of Mr. Assange is such that it would be oppressive to extradite him to the United States of America. Now, right here, President Joe Biden administration plans to continue to seek to extradite WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange from the United Kingdom to the United States to face hacking conspiracy charges. They're still after him. But again, I like to make the point that the case is not really about the case. The case is to try to get their hands on Assange. The other stuff is a fig leaf and a pretext to getting their hands on Assange. The fact that the cases are falling apart against Assange, because of that, doesn't quite matter. It is a question of what happens from the standpoint of the British court and whether Vanessa Barrister maintains this particular ruling of saying that we don't want to extradite him because he's going to kill himself. And what that even means from the standpoint of Assange and whether or not they're going to let Assange out. Stuff is up for grabs. But fairness, press freedom, liberty, none of that is being seen here. None of that is being seen here. So before people start screaming, Navalny, Assange. All of these Western media wants to bring up, Navalny. All of this stuff is based on the politics of basically what it means to be part of the West and that little clique. It's a Mean Girls. And the other countries that don't fall in line aren't in it. And so, yeah, you will use human rights and you will bring up stuff like that while simultaneously, almost like a schizophrenic patient, ignoring the fact that you have a journalist sitting in a prison that you've been prosecuting for the last 7-8 years. Sweep around your own front door. That's my point. Assange should not be in prison. Assange should have never been in house arrest. And by the way, he went for asylum, not to escape. There's a difference in those things. And the fact that he went to seek asylum because there was a case against him by a superpower that was basically he needed political asylum from, all of that stuff has shown itself to be correct and true and right. The case against them has shown itself to be farcical. And yet, the case is still there. The other case, the story I want to bring up, Jen Psaki. Let's bring that clip. Jen Psaki is defending Biden's attack on Syria and Iraq. Now, I want you to hear her defense of this because she's trying to make the point of saying, look, we did this out of self-defense. Let's play the clip.
As a matter of domestic law, the president took this action, the airstrikes that were announced yesterday by the Department of Defense, pursuant to Article 2 authority to defend U.S. personnel. The targeted strikes were directed at facilities used by Iran-backed militias involved in these ongoing attacks for purposes including weapons storage, command, logistics, and unmanned aerial vehicle operations. So Article 2, the self-defense, the defense of the United States and our interests is our domestic justification for these strikes announced yesterday. The president's view is that it was necessary, appropriate, and deliberate action, these strikes designed to limit the risk of escalation. We will take, and he believes we should and will take necessary and appropriate measures to defend U.S. personnel, partners, and allies in the region. Certainly, I would say, just kind of in relation to this question over here, we continue to believe that and have never held back from noting that Iran is a bad actor in the region. And they have taken part in and supported and participated in extremely problematic behavior in our view. At the same time, we feel that we're moving forward and seeking the opportunity to move forward on negotiations to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon is in our national interest, and that's how we will evaluate. But it was not linked to a visit by the president of Israel, nor was it linked to any elections in Iran either.
So the last time strikes were carried out by Biden, the New York Times wrote a report saying Iranian-backed militias. And then when you read the report, it made it clear that they weren't quite sure whether or not they were backed by Iran at that point. We are in Syria and Iraq. Iraq has asked us to leave on more than one occasion. And from the standpoint of being in Syria, the notion that you are carrying out defensive strikes, 20,000 miles away from home is astonishing. She's basically saying, we believe we're doing this to prevent escalation. Wait, you're attacking? You're doing airstrikes with the idea of de-escalating. The United States, our position was attacked immediately after that, like the day after. Though there were no casualties, but yes, there were strikes in regards to attacking the position of the U.S. Look, if you honestly believe that you are carrying out defensive strikes in somebody else's country, you are insane. And the notion that, we're doing this to defend ourselves. Think about what we're saying for the moment, and think about what they're saying for the moment, what they're asking you to believe and what they're asking you to buy. One of the things that the New York Times reports, it says Iran, weakened by years of harsh economic sanctions, is using its proxy militias in Iraq to set pressure on the United States and other world powers to negotiate an easing of those sanctions. So wait, you mean it's sanctions that shouldn't have been there in the first place because, they were living up to the agreement and we pulled out. So you're arguing in this paper that they are doing whatever they're doing, something that they're saying are bad actors because they're trying to ease sanctions. Why don't you just ease the sanctions? I'm making the point that we are still attacking elements in other countries that don't want us there, countries where we shouldn't be, and countries where we have no moral or legal right to exist in, especially from the standpoint of international law. And I always say international law doesn't really exist as evidence of such. That comment is insane. That comment is insane. It's schizophrenic even. But let's do this. We have a guest coming up. So you guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We will be back in a moment.
Fault Lines. Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host. He's not here today, but typically he's here, Shane Stranahan. If you guys live in the area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Shane and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make this show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. As I mentioned earlier in the headlines, President Joe Biden and his administration is going to continue to seek extradition of WikiLeaks' Julian Assange from the United Kingdom. This is Reuters. Justice Department spokesman Mark Raimondi on Tuesday said that the U.S. government will continue to challenge a British judge ruling last month that Julian Assange should not be extradited to the United States because of a risk he would commit suicide. In a January 4th ruling, Vanessa Barrister said, quote, I find his mental condition of Assange is such that he would be oppressive to extradite him to the United States of America. Basically, the judge said his autism would, on some level, push Assange to kill himself. And as such, she can't in good conscience extradite him to the United States. That is a wild, weird ruling, but that is indeed basically what she found. Well, Biden is still going to continue the extradition. Again, this is something that Obama wouldn't do. One last point before I bring in my guest. Right here. Key witness in the case against Assange has said that he lied about Assange in exchange for immunity in a story that was published in an Icelandic newspaper, Student. To have a conversation about this, we're joined with Misty Winston. Misty Winston is a political activist, organizer, and co-host of both Facts on the Ground podcast and #Free Assange Vigils. Misty, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So Biden is still going to continue to pursue Assange. And that is in spite, like I said, this story that came out, key witness in a case against Julian Assange said that he lied about Assange in exchange for immunity. In fact, let's play this clip, Andre. Let's pull the clip up and let's play this clip one more time. This is Assange legal counsel talking explicitly about this case and making the point how this makes the case against Assange that much more ludicrous. We have the clip.
This is just the latest revelation of how problematic the United States case is against Julian Assange, and in fact baseless. Of course, as you outlined at the introduction, the evidence from Thordarson that was given to the United States and formed the basis of the second superseding indictment, including allegations of hacking, has now been, on his own admission, demonstrated to have been fabricated. Not only did he misrepresent his access to Julian Assange and to WikiLeaks and his association with Julian Assange, he has now admitted that he made up and falsely misrepresented to the United States that there was any association with WikiLeaks and any association with hacking. So this is just the latest revelation to demonstrate why the US case should be dropped.
Let's stop right there. So just so we're clear, the case against Julian Assange right here, the United Kingdom to face hacking conspiracy charges. Well, that has just been found to be ludicrous. The guy lied. Misty. I mean, that's astonishing, right? 7 years. I mean, we really need to put this in perspective. They've tortured that man in public for 7 to 8 years. And part of that was him being put in a cage. This is...
Yes, he's been in Belmarsh for over 2 years now. Before that, previously he was stuck in the Ecuadorian embassy so that he could avoid extradition. And you're right, this really does blow the entire case up. It makes everything that they're trying to get Julian Assange on just ridiculous, really on its face. This is a guy who was a low-level volunteer for fundraising for WikiLeaks in 2010. He's a convicted child molester and a diagnosed sociopath. And that's their key witness. And that's, he came out in Student, which is an Icelandic publication, and basically recanted and walked back every single charge or claim that he made against Julian Assange. And it's astonishing to me that more people aren't talking about this. In my opinion, this is one of the biggest stories, in the world right now. And our mainstream media in the United States hasn't touched it really at all. Which is really bizarre to me. But yeah, this revelation has really, like Jen Robinson said, that was Jen Robinson was just speaking there, Julian Assange's longtime attorney. This really does make the case completely ridiculous. It should be thrown out immediately.
But see, that should sit, and that goes to my point. The case was never about the case. Like, this was never, okay, we're just going to have a legal proceeding against somebody because we believe that person committed a crime. We're going to do the typical legal This was always a political prosecution. The case against Assange was always just a fig leaf to get their hands on Assange. That's the way I always saw it.
100%. And they decided that they were willing to go to the lengths of, aligning themselves with somebody like Siggy Thordarson, who is not a good actor. And that's how terrible their case is that's what they have to resort to, is somebody with that kind of a background and absolutely no credibility whatsoever to try to, manifest a case that they can somehow put through to get Julian Assange. This has never been about justice. This has never been about, protecting the United States or none of that stuff. I mean, it's astonishing enough that we're trying to convict or charge an Australian journalist under United States laws.
Without protection of those laws.
Right, without the protections of the First Amendment. Mike Pompeo said those don't apply, but apparently the Extradition Act does apply, which is like wanting to have your cake and eat it too.
Exactly.
But this, it really is.
That means that anybody around the globe is held up potentially to U.S. law.
Yes.
But they have no protections under those. I mean, that's an astonishing statement.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, Jamarl, this is, I want everybody to listen to this one sentence because this should terrify everyone. The United States is seeking global jurisdiction over information and journalism. Period. That's what's happening here. They want global jurisdiction over journalism and information. And that should terrify everyone. What this means essentially is that the United States can go anywhere they want and snatch up anybody that they want for publishing or posting something that they don't like or that embarrasses them. And that is terrifying.
That is terrifying. And it should be terrifying and it should be unacceptable. And yet, those countries conform themselves to try to catch him. I mean, in regards to Europe, and it's why do you think that Obama was willing to give Assange, basically saying, look, I am not willing to jump the shark on journalism in this way. So yes, Assange is aggravating me, but no, I'm not going to go after him. But Biden is like, yes, get him.
Frankly, I think Obama was worried about his legacy, quote unquote legacy. I think that they needed somebody like Trump, who doesn't really care and is fine being a bully, to go through with having him arrested. And I think that Biden at this point is continuing to go through with it because at this point, the manufacturing of consent has happened. They've already demonized him in the media. They've made him into like this comic book villain that everybody, hates. And they have all there's been a decade-long smear campaign against him. And so I think that the Biden campaign at this point feels very comfortable in the fact that, if you think about it, Jamarl, nobody's paying attention. Mainstream media is not covering this. In the United States, we can't get people to talk about it. It's difficult for me to even get independent media to talk about it.
Well, that's the other part.
I think it's
why.
Yes.
Because
I don't know.
Look, there are some people, like you said, this is one of the most important issues where they look at this issue and say, okay, this is the highest issue. But even among people who don't consider this to be of the highest of priorities, it's still important. When you get down to it, especially because its implications are monstrous when you think about it, the ramifications.
It's not even just the implication. Well, it's not. What's frustrating to me is that it's not even just that this is, this is a fellow journalist or whatever. This is the future of press freedom.
Mm-hmm.
This is a monumental deal. This will be the first time a journalist is ever charged under the Espionage Act, ever convicted under the Espionage Act.
Exactly.
That's an unbelievably terrifying precedent. And so the fact that I can't get and really what it is I think a lot of people, especially in the independent media space, are concerned about algorithms and clicks and subscribers and all of that stuff.
I don't think that's it. I don't think
I do.
No, as somebody
We've had people tell us that, Jamarl. It's really unfortunate.
Okay, but I was going to say, as somebody who has a channel, because to me, I'm
not saying all. I'm not saying all. There are people who do.
I do videos when I'm just playing chess, right? I know there are 3 people who are going to watch those videos. right? It's like when you care about something, you just do the video. It doesn't adversely hurt you. It's 20 minutes of your time or whatever else. It's just, this is what I'm getting at. So I don't know. Maybe that's not the way I thought about it. I don't know. I haven't heard anybody tell me that.
I think that it's a lot different than chess, though, because if you even put Assange in a title, it will be demonetized. It will be kicked back on the algorithm. It will. It really does. It can put your channel in jeopardy. And again, it's not all. There are plenty of people out there. Slow Newsday, Franco, Convo Couch. There's a ton of people who are out there. Crystal and Sagar did a piece on this. Yeah. There are a lot of people out there who are covering it. It's just not enough. It's nowhere near enough. We need, especially given that we have a complete mainstream media blackout, we need independent media to pick up the slack there.
Let me ask you this. Why do you think there is that mainstream media blackout?
Because I think that they are, it's kind of establishment media. It's, kind of state-controlled media. They're all owned by corporations, which also kind of own our government. And so they don't want to talk about this. They don't want, they don't want people to know what's actually happening to Julian Assange because they want this to be able to go through quietly. They want to be able.
But why? This is one of those things that hits their jobs. Like, for example, Rachel Maddow hates Assange. Or Rachel Maddow did a segment on Assange.
Yes. Every once in a while they will.
Yeah. That's kind of the point I'm getting at. It does affect, I don't think Chuck Todd is ever going to have an issue with press freedom. Chuck Todd is never going to jail to protect the source, right?
No.
So Chuck Todd is going to be okay. So Chuck Todd is never going to do a segment, right? But for somebody who, let's say like Engel or some of these other journalists who get those sources, you would think that would be an issue. So I don't know. I think it's weirder that it's not.
Yes.
Of more relevant.
No, I agree. And not only that, Jamarl, this is a huge story. It's a historic court case on press freedom. And so the fact that journalists aren't covering a monumental news story is really baffling to me. Forget the fact that it's journalism, the future of press freedom, the destruction of the First Amendment in broad daylight. This is a huge new, especially this story that just came out about Siggy Thordarson. That's a bombshell. Talk about a bombshell. The whole case has just been thrown under the bus and, they still won't talk about it. So, I can speculate as to why they're not doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know, but they really need to start covering it more because we are very, very dangerously close to losing First Amendment rights in this country.
What's the next step for Assange? Because basically the judge said, I think he'll kill himself in America jails. And look, that indictment in and of itself is astonishing, right? But it's like your jails are so horrific that we think he would just kill himself as opposed to lounging in our, spas
A point, if I could really quickly, a point I would like to make about that is the judge said that she won't send him to the United States because he's in such a poor mental state that he could potentially kill himself if he is sent to the United States. But why does she think that he is in that particular state? It's because of the treatment that he's been receiving in the UK jail where he's at right now. They call Belmarsh the UK Gitmo.
Right.
So
that's why it's shocking that she's making this statement on American jails.
Yeah, and the fact that she then denied him bail is just ridiculous. I mean, he's in a terrible mental state, but we're going to keep him in there.
What does she expect to take place? I mean, because she's basically said, okay, well, no, I'm not going to send him back to America, but yes, I'm going to keep him in jail. What?
I know. It makes no sense.
So what's the thought? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, when is the next trial? Well, like, when is the next trial? And in the next case, does he have a potential of getting out?
We don't know because right now we're waiting for the appeal. Well, first of all, we're waiting for the UK courts to decide whether or not the U.S. appeal even has merits to be heard. And we still don't have that. And there's no deadline for that. So he is literally just laying like in limbo. There's no date. There's no deadline. He's just there waiting for something to happen. And we have no idea when that's going to take place. So once we get that, then the appeal could be heard. Basically, they're just trying to drag this out. I think they're trying to break him down. I think they're trying to make an example of him. And it's really unfortunate because he's there for no reason whatsoever, and they're destroying this man for political reasons, and that should really terrify everyone, because if they're going to do it to him, they'll do it to anybody.
Two questions on this. One, the Australian government, where are they? I mean, he's an Australian citizen, and basically they've tortured an Australian citizen in broad daylight, in the light of the world, and Australia is mum, basically. On the second front, if you needed to communicate to people in real clear terms, like, look, this is why this case is important, just as a 20-second snapshot, and I think you have extremely well in the course of this interview. I'm just making as a kind of an end point. What would it be?
So the Australian government, that's a very good question. I would really like to know the answer to that, because they are very quick to speak on, behalf of Navalny and the treatment that he's receiving, but they won't even mention Julian Assange's name. That's starting to change. We're seeing some MPs in Australia start to speak out more and more. Hopefully that will continue. And then just as far as what I wish to get across to people, it's the sentence I asked you to remember earlier. The United States is seeking global jurisdiction over information and journalism. That's what this case is about. That's what it's always been about. And we have to fight back against this. This really will set a dangerous precedent. So, yeah, I think that's, if I could make it like as concise and as clear as I could, it would be that one single sentence.
Missy, thank you. Great segment. Honestly, great segment. I covered this in the headlines, but no, you put it in amazing and explicit terms. The voice that
Thank you for having me on. You guys have always been really great about supporting Assange and helping to get the word out. So we really do appreciate that.
Yeah, we try to. I mean, when stories come out, we always cover the stories. And so it's one of those things where we always have an eye in regards to, okay, what's taking place in the case? What's the development, et cetera, because we always, look, it was a big deal to us. Press freedom, right? I mean, for obvious reasons, it's a big deal it should be in anybody in media space, independent or otherwise. So thank you for doing what you're doing. Yeah. The voice that you guys were listening to is Missy Winston. She's a political activist, organizer, and co-host of both Facts on the Ground podcast and #FreeAssange Visuals. You can follow Missy on Twitter at Sarcasm Stardust and Facts on the Ground podcast on YouTube and on Twitter at FOTG Podcast. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We will be back in a moment.
Fault Lines. We are above all the latest developments, and we don't take any sides. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
What's the most important hour of the day? It's the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon. On this show, we don't just deliver the latest headlines, we divide the real from the fake. Tune in to hear from some of the most brilliant political minds of today, get in-depth news and analysis that goes beyond the surface and dig straight into the details. Set your clock to the Critical Hour for a news perspective unlike any of those other guys. Tune in to the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon, weekdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, and catch us on Facebook Live. You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined, in spirit, by my co-host, Shane Stranahan. He's not feeling well today, so you're not going to see him sitting across from me. Coming out of Washington, D.C., 105.5 FM on Radio Sputnik. So, we've been covering Ethiopia. We've covered this topic, I think, over the course of the last year as the conflict arose. What started off as what seemed to be a military campaign between the Ethiopian government of Abiy Ahmed against Tigrayan forces looks more and more like a civil war, at the very least, based on the latest reporting by the New York Times, right here. In a major turn in Ethiopia's 8-month civil war in the northern Tigrayan region, Tigrayan fighters began entering the regional capital city Monday after Ethiopian government troops retreated from the city. The Ethiopian military has occupied the Tigray region since last November after invading in cooperation with Eritrean and militia to wrest control from the regional government. The Tigrayan forces, known as the Tigrayan Defense Force, spent months regrouping and recruiting new fighters, and then in the past week began rolling a counterattack towards the capital, Mekelle. To have a conversation about this, we're joined with Theodos Fikre. He is co-founder and former co-editor of theGuineaJournal.com. Theodos, welcome back to the show, man. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You are the person we go to get context on this. One of my nurses is Ethiopian, and she is active in the community of this very specific issue. She is annoyed at the way that the government and media is treating it, basically saying that they are picking on the Ethiopian government, and that she goes very far into basically absolving the Ethiopian government of blame. The thing is, initially when we talked about this, we were talking about this in terms of, okay, the Ethiopian government, sovereign, is taking an action against basically rebels of a region. But the fact that these guys are able to basically retake territory sounds like a civil war. I mean, it sounds like basically that this is either Tigrayan region extricating itself from being under Ethiopia into trying to be their own thing. And Ethiopia trying to bring them back into the fold and saying, no, you are not your own thing. This is Ethiopia. You're part of Ethiopia. And having enough forces on both sides to basically be at odds. Is that characterization correct? Or please tell me and explain what I'm missing. And
Pretty much. I mean, remember, like when you first had me on the show, initially I supported the campaign as long as it was limited and it was targeting TPLF, which they're a terrorist group. That's not me just saying that. The U.S. government labeled them a terrorist group. And so, for 27 years, up until Abiy Ahmed rose to power, TPLF ruled Ethiopia with an iron fist.
Right.
And their military capability and firepower is almost unmatched in Ethiopia. And when they got booted from power, they basically ran off to Mekelle and set up an operation center in Tigray. And then I know this narrative is being omitted by Western media and mainstream media in general, but TPLF are the ones that started the whole conflict.
Right there.
They attacked. I'm sorry, what was that?
No, I said right there. I mean, that's always missed. Always missed.
On purpose, have really almost unmatched military know-how and prowess in Ethiopia. They also, over 27 years, have established a lot of relationships with capitals around the world, with bureaucrats, politicians, and technocrats. And they were able to call their chits when this hostilities broke out.
That is uber fascinating because Abiy Ahmed got the Peace Prize, and he got the Peace Prize for ending the war with the Tria. Okay. Well, who was fighting in that war with the Tria? Well, TPLF, right? Because they had been in power for God knows how long. And so you have the situation where, okay, he ends the war with the Tria, but the TPLF still has some level of a power base, despite the fact that Ethiopian is supposed to be sovereign. I mean, that's what I mean. This is just very weird. So the TPLF, they lose power, and yet they maintain some kind of militaristic power center. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. I mean, imagine if this is like the Confederacy in America, right? Or even in modern day. Let's assume a right-wing militia launches missiles from Texas over, starts lobbing missiles over into Washington, D.C. and to Canada, because they also TPLF also launched missiles into Eritrea.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that the U.S. government is not going to respond forcefully?
It will respond forcefully. And I think to your point is, Abiy Ahmed was aware that the TPLF wasn't going to be, I guess. So what's the thought? That the TPLF lost power to Abiy Ahmed, but was not going to accept the status of being democratically depowered? Is that the thought? I mean, because that's what the other woman, I mean, that's what she's arguing. She's like, look, they were never going to accept losing power.
Right. Well, and this is for the record. I'm no fan of Abiy Ahmed either.
Right.
Abiy did not gain power democratically. He kind of rose through the ranks, and when TPLF or EPRDF back then went by the wayside, he kind of rose up to the top. And by the way, he didn't just rise out of nowhere. Yeah. He had the backing of a lot of outside interests. Rulers in Africa don't just manifest themselves. They're good for the people.
Right.
They're kind of chosen and propped up by outsiders. And so, yeah, I'm not saying that Abiy is blameless in this. There's plenty of blame to go around because, and like I said, even though I initially supported the limited operation, I always said from the outset that if this smacks of collective punishment, I would withdraw my support.
Right.
And I watched, and I kind of started seeing evidence that it might be. And then when Mekele was repatriated in December, the first thing Abiy Ahmed should have done was turn back the power, turn back the internet, and let people know that, hey, Tagaru people, you are Ethiopians. We're going to take care of you. It should have been a massive humanitarian effort, and it didn't. He kept the internet shut off. Power was intermittent. So,
but to be fair, just to be fair, is it possible? I mean, because at a certain point, it's a militaristic campaign. And I would imagine that, and this is, again, not a rah-rah for any particular person. We're just saying the politics of it. Insurgency. Like, there's no reason for him to believe that this capital or the center of power that was against him is going to be in his camp, which means that allowing devices like Twitter and Facebook and allowing these other mechanisms, well, those things also allow people to communicate and put people to resist. So from the standpoint of people in power, they keep the stuff cut off. It's not, meaning it's not, his intent might not have been collective punishment. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
and by the way, this is not me rah-rah Abiy Ahmed either. I'm just talking about the reasons.
No, it's just, look, in the 21st century, the internet is essential.
Yes.
And then when you cut off, it's not just social media. They cut off the internet, period.
Yeah.
And so that devastates not only businesses, but families that were trying to reach their family members in Mekele and Adigrat and Hausen and beyond.
No, Teddy, I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you in regards to its wide-ranging implications and how hard or how difficult it is for people to function in it. I'm saying that in the contest of kings, all of that stuff matters less to the person who is trying to retain power. And it sounds like Abiy had concerns about whether or not he was going to be able to retain power, and that mattered more. That it's not, his objective wasn't a collective punishment. His objective was, how do I keep or destroy the capability of my adversary of communicating? And unfortunately, it's like if you drop a bomb off in a particular place, well, in their case, this bomb is virtual. It's like this thing, we need to stop their ability to communicate. We need to it's not, I'm saying that it's great. I'm not saying it is right. I'm just saying that's probably the thinking behind it. It was more militaristic.
Yeah, I mean, that's been tried in Afghanistan. That's been tried.
Yeah.
When you in Vietnam, when you fight an insurgency, and you and in the process kind of target the civilian population, they end up folding under the umbrella of whatever organization that is putting up the insurgency. That's evident. You should never attack the civilian population.
Well, oh man, I don't want to get in. I guess we're quibbling over intent.
Right.
And it's like, to me, the intent, because if it was me, yes, I would want the civilian population to be able to communicate. No, I would not have the civilian population communicate if I can't necessarily disassociate the civilian population that is on my side versus the ones that are not. That's the problem. Like, the problem is, how do I stop my enemy? Like, this is a stronghold of his opposition, where these guys have basically just retaken.
This is why war is always messy.
That's why it's always horrible, because there's no way, like there's no clean way to do anything.
Right.
It's like the very act of doing one destroys something else, and it's like the very act of destroying something else creates opposition to you in the first place. Like it's a horrible thing. So I'm agreeing with you. I guess it's the thing of intent. One thing I wanted to get to before we leave, the mechanics of how this started, because you made the point of saying that the TPLF seemed like they were going to make a military campaign, in which case Abiy Ahmed responded. But what were the mechanics of that? I mean, like you said, they're a militaristic stronghold. Like you said, if it was like the Confederate, who would say, okay, we're going to start this place as a power base, and we're going to move out from that particular power base to push back. They have all sorts of political connections around the world, which is why when the world looked at it, they were hostile, put it mildly, to the Ethiopian government.
Just to let you know how sophisticated they are. I mean, there's a lot of people that use, for example, hashtag Tigray genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Every morning there's a group of people that meet, activists, Tigrayan activists that meet up and they say, okay, these are the hashtags that we're going to use, space them out so that it gets noticed. I mean, this is a very sophisticated propaganda campaign. And what I tell people all the time, I tweeted this the other day, look, I acknowledge that there's crimes against humanity taking place in Tigray. Right. But if you cannot acknowledge that TPLF is culpable and is equally as blameworthy, then you're either an apologist or you're a propagandist. So, yeah, the parliament within the Ethiopian community is that feelings are so polarized that very few people are able to look at these things through nuance. Everyone looks at these things through emotion,
right,
and through a lens of tribalism.
So what? Even when we're saying Tigrayan, there's almost like a problem with the statement. They're Ethiopian.
Right.
It's that.
Of course.
But the very act of me saying that, right, is part of the Civil War.
Right. And for the record, for what it's worth, on my dad's side, I'm at least about like 20% at Tigrayan. The dash is at Tagaru, but I'm at least 25% at Tigrayan. I'm within my dad's side alone. Almost every Ethiopian is a mix of countless cultures. I don't even like to call them tribes. So it's just asinine for anyone to sit up here and say, I'm purely one. There's no such thing. We're just Ethiopian, and above that, we're human beings.
The voice that you guys are listening to is Theodoros Fikre. Theodoros is co-founder and former editor of theGuianJournal.com. You can follow Theodoros on Twitter at Theodoros Fikre and find his column at The Guion Journal. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be back up with Steve Brumbine. Back in a moment.
Fault Lines.
So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, I mean, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show by any means necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my invisible co-host. He's not necessarily here. Shane is not necessarily feeling all that well today, so you're not going to see Shane there. However, I'm here, and hopefully I am sufficient for your needs in this moment. We are joined with one of my favorite guests, actually. And I know I said that a lot, because a lot of the people we bring on, whether they're on the left, right, somewhere in between, somewhere off the spectrum, whatever we're talking, usually they're people who I like to talk to. So, but Steve Brumbine is a political, economic, and social justice activist and founder of Real Progress and Real Progress in Action. a 501c3, 501c4, respectively, dedicated to education and advocacy for modern monetary theory, and host of The Untouchables. Steve, what's going on, man? Thank you for joining me.
So much for having me on. I got the Kim Carnes voice. I've got a little bit of a frog, so hopefully your audience
it's okay. We can hear you.
With my sexiness.
Yeah, it's the sexy morning voice. That's what that is. It's like the bedtime voice. You're gonna hear Steve's bedtime voice the whole time through. No, it's okay. It's okay. We can make this work. No, man, you doing okay? Everything good?
Yeah, I interestingly enough, I got the double jab from Pfizer.
Did you?
And then out of the blue the other day, I started feeling this like bug. So I actually went and got tested to see if I'm going to be one of those breakthrough guys. I've had COVID twice now.
Have you?
And once put me in the hospital. So I don't feel sick like that, but I didn't expect it to hit me like the other ones because I am, I did get the vaccine. So
wow,
we'll see what happens, man. But either way, it feels like RSV or some sort of frog. So
yeah, no worries. So I've had the Pfizer BioNTech. I've had that one.
What's that?
I had Pfizer BioNTech. Before we could come back to the office, we had to get our vaccine, so I had the RNA one. I had no issues from it. I didn't even, no feeling from it outside of just the pain in the arm for a day, or the numbness for a day or so. I've been, at this point, across the world, got back. They weren't necessarily wearing them like talked about in Switzerland. You go into a store, yes. Everywhere else, no. And so, look, it's, there are some people who already break through, right? But apparently, the people who are dying are those unvaccinated. Like when you're looking at the stats on that stuff, it's like the people who got the vaccinations for the most part are not dropping dead. So
that's right.
On that part, that's positive. But now I wanted to bring you on. You were making the point, you said there was a fight, a state by state Medicare for all fight. And you sent me the thing about the Untouchables, the new season or the Untouchables. So let's talk about both. Which one you want to go to first?
Do it.
The fight.
Well, why don't we start with state by state?
Okay, let's go state by state.
One.
Now, personally, I don't think states should be trying to do Medicare for all. I think it's ridiculous for states to try to do Medicare for all. Now, am I wrong on that or am I right on that? And I think that because states have to balance their budgets and the government doesn't.
You know what? You nailed it. There's more to that story, though, right? Because there's probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 states that have an economy that is uniquely capable of absorbing larger than average ebbs and flows. Like California might be one of them. Okay. But if you're in any way, shape, or form not myopic about Medicare for all, and you realize we've got a climate crisis coming too, you start thinking about how you're going to fund, say, the Arctic's burning up. Oregon, Portland's hottest it's ever been. So we've got some real things going on right here, right now. And you start thinking, what happens if a major health issue came up like a pandemic and a state is trying to run some state-based program?
Right.
Well, they flat out are going to beg the federal government to save them because they're not going to be able to do this. Now, unfortunately, you know how this goes. I've been doing this for a long time, and our movement tends to be angry, reactionary when you tell them, hey, that isn't going to work. Like, how the hell could you possibly know that? And it's like, well, it's kind of basics, man. It's like you can see the ebbs and flows. You can see the two sides of the ledger, and you understand that states like you and I cannot create their own currency.
Correct.
So if you have a health issue that sweeps your state, or we have a pandemic, or there's shortages in the supply of any given type of thing, or worse, this is the real big one for me. Let's say you didn't plan for more doctors and nurses in your state, and now all of a sudden you create Medicare for all, and you've got healthcare migration into your state, and you don't have the real resources to support that. There's so many issues there. It's not funny, but the primary issue for me about this, I think it's a really, really bad plan. I've been castigated. I've been put out there as a splitter. I've been called a troll.
Why? Because
my
you're against the
integrity has been
state,
shot down. Horrible.
Medicare for all. Look, I've been against it from the beginning, but for the exact same reason. My thought was states need to balance their budget. So how is the state going to accommodate something like that? It's too expensive.
They're going to try and get waivers. They're going to try and do all kinds of stuff. It's spaghetti, Yeah. And here's the thing. This is the one thing that I will give them. They're desperate. They're trying to find some way around a do-nothing Congress that has shown it will not take
1000%
necessary
agree.
steps, even in a pandemic. So to their credit, they're trying to do something. I just don't agree with the something.
And the problem becomes, if it fails, what does it mean going forward? Like, it's not,
exactly.
It's not a situation where it's like, okay, dude, I'm trying to stop you from that. It's not that. It's more so, is that even possible to do? At least under the guidelines that you're trying to do it. Even though I reckon, look, I get it, right? And if they can come up with a model for it, fair enough. I mean, Romney came up with a model for it in what was it, Maine or whatever he came from. But I mean, I don't know. I've been somewhat against it, even for California. California has a weird budget, especially in regards to how they do education and the way they tethered financing and everything else. Even they would have a hard time doing something like that. And it's like the 5th largest economy. It's like if your budget is finite, very specific, right? You have to balance those two things. Okay, how much revenue do you have in? How much do you have going out? And like you said, the state was going to, at some point, have to petition the federal government for it because the state is not going to be able to afford it.
That's right. That's right. And, let me ask you, because I know you and I know your heart. You and I are both pro Medicare for all, are we not?
1000%.
We are both 100% for healthcare as a right. We would go as far as we could with that. I know we would. You know what I mean? So why would we be cast as negative Nancys and splitters for taking a position that's economically literate? And the worst part about this, and this might be the grossest thing, when, somebody's trying to get somebody to prescribe them Oxycontin, they go out there and go to one doctor. A doctor says, you know what, man, I see what you're doing. You ain't getting no Oxy.
Right.
And they go say, all right, well, I'm going to go to the next doctor. Next doctor says, no Oxy. They finally find some chop shop that gives them Oxy, and they're like, you're my doctor, right? This is what these folks are doing with economists,
Right,
and so sadly, the integrity of their mission, I give them an A+ for heart. I give them an F- for acting just like David Brock trolls and how they attack anyone that states not the right way to go.
Well, yeah, reality doesn't care about their ideology. And
no, exactly.
I totally understand what they want, and I agree with their wants. Catch is, how do you do it? And I think the problem becomes, on some level, okay, is there a middle ground between those things? Meaning, yes, the federal government is not doing its job. Okay, so that boils it down to the states. Okay, how does the state get XYZ accomplished? It becomes that. And I don't need to be ideological about that from the standpoint of the state.
Let me tell you what I think is really cool. If you look across the country, you realize, I say cool, it's almost facetious. But you look across the country and you see these places that have one hospital within a 200-mile radius. Yeah. They don't have the clinics. They don't have the service portals. They don't have anywhere near enough doctors, nurses, you name it, right? And so if I were trying to advise them, and they don't care what I think, by the way, but if I were to try to advise them, I would tell them, like Professor Fadl Kaboub says, build out those clinics, build out those local clinics, get your doctors in there, start recruiting this stuff, start building out that infrastructure so that when they try to pass Medicare for all, if you advance it at the national level, you've got the infrastructure to support it. Yeah. But it doesn't just happen. You have to plan for this so that you have the real resources in place to pull that off. And like I said, maybe a couple states could do it tenuously under blue sky conditions, but try that in Alabama. Try that in Florida. Try that in Idaho or Iowa. And it's not happening. And so this whole idea of state by state is, in my opinion, very misleading and in many ways national healthcare hampering idea. It's stealing resources from a larger initiative that really should be where the focus is. And that's my take.
Well, it's like, how do you do this in West Virginia? West Virginia is like the third poorest or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if the budget is not there for it, how do you do it? I mean, and that means basically the poor states are going to be at worse ends because they're not going to be able to afford it. Yeah, it just, look, same thing with climate, right? The United States is 5% of the globe. And so any initiative on climate is by definition going to be insufficient just because we're 5% of the globe. And yes, we put out a lot of it. That's true. But there are other countries, and those countries are going to want to grow just like we did. And they're going to want to expand just like we did. And they're going to point and say, well, you were able to do that. How are you going to try to hamper us? It's that stuff. And that stuff on some level needs to be meted out on a global way, which instead is meted out from the standpoint of competition. Meaning, we're not going to have a conversation about it. We're just going to try to fight each other and kill each other in a knife fight. Whoever walks out is resolved.
You're so right. I want to bring it back momentarily to the Medicare thing, though, because what you just said, though, that competition, that is what it goes on with our states in the United States. We have a race to the bottom. The states like Texas slash their tax base and say, come on down to Texas. We got a home for you. And those big businesses come down there. These, athletes and rich people and others move down there, and they leave tax bases that are to fund schools dry. They leave deserts like Flint, Michigan. They leave deserts all around the country where the tax base is dried up, and those people are stuck.
Yeah.
And you try and make this case about the race to the bottom. You saw Sam Brownback do this in Kansas. I mean, remember Rick Perry bragging about luring businesses to Texas?
I mean, that's what they do. And
that's
not just states, that's countries at a certain point, like in Europe and whatnot. Before you go, we have about 30 seconds. I want you to tell us about the new Untouchables.
Yes, this is very important. We have our second season coming out, and we had Olympic gold medalist Cindy Brown, who was attacked with identity fraud. Her a loan was taken out on her home without her knowledge. It was a partner that took her signature and signed fraudulent loans, and then she was foreclosed on.
Oh, wow.
Police came to her home.
Steve, we're going to have
down
to
her door.
Give us the information for that, and we're going to put it at the bottom of the video so people can see.
Yes, please.
Drumbine is a political, economic, social justice activist and founder of Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action. You can follow Steve on Twitter at Steve Drumbine and Real Progress US. You guys are listening to Fault Lines. Thomas Stranahan, back in a moment.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault Lines.
Live from the divided states of America, precipitously perched at the edge of this resilient and exploited globe. Welcome to your context lens for the American perspective. In the left, right, and independent corner. I am your host, Jamarl Thomas, your indefatigable, burning ember in the darkness, last man on the wall, Jamarl Thomas. My co-host, Shane Stranahan, is not feeling all that well today, but he will probably be back tomorrow the next day. That said, I am here. This is Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. All right, let's get to the headlines. In the news, about 15,570 new COVID cases were reported in the United States yesterday, with about 161 new deaths. Over the past week, there's been an average of about 11,842 cases per day, a decrease of 15% from the average 2 weeks earlier. 46% of the American public has been fully vaccinated, and 54% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected 33,607,895 human beings across the United States and has killed, put in the ground, 603,758 moms, dads, and children. 11 people have now been confirmed dead from the collapse of Miami building, and 150 others are still missing. No survivors have been found under the rubble since the morning of the disaster. We need to get someone to discuss why it happened, how it happened, and larger implications, because that is an outright disaster. A poll of San Franciscoans revealed that 70% of the people believe that the quality of life in their city has gone down, mentioning problems with crime and homelessness, with 753% increase in car break-ins over the last 13 months. A key witness in the case against Julian Assange said that they lied about Assange in exchange for immunity. In a story published on Saturday, the Icelandic newspaper Student quoted convicted hacker Sergeant Sigi Thordarson and saying that he misrepresented himself as a more prominent member of WikiLeaks than he actually was, and gave evidence on WikiLeaks that has now been revealed to be fabricated. fugitive whistleblower Edward Snowden said about the story that Assange case is now over. In fact, Andre, we have a clip for that. Let's load the clip for that. We had a really good conversation with Misty Winston about that. Definitely check that out in the last segment where we did a deep dive into this very specific issue. The case against Assange has basically been blown to bits. It was a fig leaf to begin with, and yet that fig leaf has been exposed as basically nothing. They tortured that man for 8 years in the public sphere, a journalist. He is apparently supposed to be attacked by our laws, but have no protections of our laws. And now we're finding this stuff to be nonsense, something that we knew was already a political prosecution. Andre, we got the clip. Let's play it.
This is just the latest revelation of how problematic the United States case is against Julian Assange, and in fact baseless. Of course, as you outlined at the introduction, the evidence from Thordarson that was given to the United States and formed the basis of the second superseding indictment, including allegations of hacking, has now been, on his own admission, demonstrated to have been fabricated. Not only did he misrepresent his access to Julian Assange and to WikiLeaks and his association with Julian Assange, he has now admitted that he made up and falsely misrepresented to the United States that there was any association with WikiLeaks and any association with hacking. So this is just the latest revelation to demonstrate why the US case should be dropped. We have to begin, of course, with the free speech implications. Free speech groups, the Washington Post, the New York Times, mainstream media are unanimously against and have denounced this prosecution as a threat to freedom of speech in the United States. But leaving that aside, the factual basis for this case has completely fallen apart. And we have been calling for this case to be dropped for a very long time. And this is just the latest form of abuse demonstrated in this case that shows why it ought to be dropped.
Yes, the case should be dropped. And there's something to be said about the larger journalistic or the larger legal implications for journalism in the United States with the fact that this case is being brought at all. If you go back and look at Obama and his perspective of this, it was basically of the implications of what does it mean for journalism if you basically prosecute a journalist for journalism. Let's go to the next one. Rebels in Ethiopia's Tigray region have retaken the regional capital of Tigray, Mekelle, as government forces retreated from the city. The Ethiopian government has been harshly criticized and continuously scrutinized for its violent occupation of Tigray late last year following hostilities ramping up with the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. Ethiopia has since called for a unilateral ceasefire in Tigray. South Africa's former leader, Jacob Zuma, has been convicted of contempt of court and ordered to serve 15 months in prison after failing to make an appearance on charges of corruption before the country's constitutional court, which one judge said Zuma tried to destroy by conducting a, quote, politically motivated spear campaign, unquote, against the institution. And last, 2 Americans who were charged in a Japanese court with helping Nissan's former chairman, Carlos Ghosn, flee have apologized. Ghosn, currently a fugitive living in Lebanon, which has no extradition treaty with Japan. Ghosn is wanted on charges of financial misconduct and fled Japan inside a box with musical equipment aboard a plane. How dramatic. Those are your headlines. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. The other story I want to get to has to do with Joe Biden basically carrying out airstrikes. If you remember when Biden first took office, there was this conversation where it's like, Putin's a killer with no soul. Now, I believe that Joe Biden had this conversation every bit as much as I believe Joe Biden had a conversation with Mandela, and that Joe Biden was basically put into prison in South Africa while trying to see Mandela, and that Mandela thanked him after it. I totally believe Joe Biden on this. I believe that Joe Biden had this conversation every bit as much as I believe Joe Biden was out there marching for the civil rights movement. That's what I believe, meaning I don't believe it at all. But regardless of whether I believe it at all, the idea that the president of the United States carries out an airstrike that kills 22 people, and yet his soul is not besmirched as a killer, despite the killing. Always fantastic. That's always a fascinating aspect of the media to me. The ability to have this thing right here, pay no attention to the man in the mirror, and yet speak as if you are blameless. The United States, in the last airstrikes that it carried out, were supposedly against Iranian militias. Okay, we're back to this again. New York Times, U.S. carries out airstrikes in Iraq and Syria. All right. What is your justification, A, for being there, or B, stealing the materials from Syria? Now, Donald Trump, when he was in office, made the point of saying that Obama invaded Syria for a regime change war and killed and got 500,000 Syrians killed as a result. That's a president implicating another president in what should be crimes, moral, legal, ethical. By the same token, Donald Trump would say, now that we are here, we are going to steal the oil. Or, in his words, protect the oil in this kind of mob boss way. Joe Biden hasn't changed that particular policy. We're still taking the resources in that particular region. And it's not necessarily because it's great oil in the sense that there's a ton of it. It's more so on some level that it deprives it from the Syrian government, making that government difficult to operate, making those people and putting those people in a somewhat of a collective punishment. So you get this thing of you are in somebody else's country that you basically invaded. They don't want you there. They don't need you there. And your reason for being there, at the very least, that you're telling the American public on an overt level, is unclear at best. You're also in a country that does not want you there, meaning Iraq, and that has been taking votes for you to leave that you have just been blowing off. And so, in the context of that, you are attacking installations, and you are calling that self-defense. It's strange on its face. Let's hear Jen Psaki dance between the raindrops. Let's play this clip, Andre. I should have given you a heads up. I'm sorry. But let me know when you pull that clip. I apologize. That's excellent. Our engineer is the greatest ever. Greatest man alive. Let's play the clip.
As a matter of domestic law, the president took this action, the airstrikes that were announced yesterday by the Department of Defense, pursuant to Article 2 authority to defend U.S. personnel. The targeted strikes were directed at facilities used by Iran-backed militias involved in these ongoing attacks for purposes including weapons storage, command, logistics, and unmanned aerial vehicle operations. So Article 2, the self-defense, the defense of the United States and our interests is our domestic justification for these strikes announced yesterday. The president's view is that it was necessary, appropriate, and deliberate action, these strikes designed to limit the risk of escalation. We will take, and he believes we should and will take necessary and appropriate measures to defend U.S. personnel, partners, and allies in the region. Certainly, I would say, just kind of in relation to this question over here, we continue to believe that and have never held back from noting that Iran is a bad actor in the region. And they have taken part in and supported and participated in problematic, extremely problematic behavior in our view. At the same time, we feel that we're moving forward and seeking the opportunity to move forward on negotiations to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon is in our national interest, and that's how we will evaluate. But it was not linked to a visit by the president of Israel, nor was it linked to any elections in Iran either.
A few years prior, the person who was in that office murdered Soleimani, had him lured to a country on the idea of peace and had him murdered. The justification, the reason for this was that there was an impending attack, an imminent attack. Imminent has a temporal domain to it, meaning imminent is not 20 years. Imminent is very specific. There's a temporal quantity to it, and we can argue over the temporal quantity and what that number is. Is it 1 day? Is it 1 week? Is it 2 hours? But at the very least, let's at very least acknowledge that imminent means something that is happening or going to happen fast. So when somebody asks you, okay, well, what do you know? Well, it was an imminent attack. Okay, imminent when? We don't know. Then how do you know it was imminent? Because it was imminent. I get sick of the political language. Fact of the matter is they just murdered a guy because they wanted to murder a guy. And in this case, the American public basically was like, we don't know who he is. Okay, fair enough. They kill him, they kill him. But think about what we're talking about here. Iran is a bad actor. When you just had a guy murdered that the justification for it was lacking at best, at the very least an explanation, and the consequences of it were far higher. I get it's a bad actor from your standpoint because there are things that we want, and within the context of the things that we want, they're doing things that we don't like what they're doing, and so they're a bad actor in comparison to us. Yes, I get that. And I suppose the same thing would be true in the other regard. The point that I'm trying to make here is arguing, justifying a strike thousands of miles away in a country that we shouldn't be in. And in some level, what we're saying is we are striking this because we are trying to, what she said, to limit the risk of escalation by attacking this area. It's Orwellian in the way that it's speaking. We were immediately hit after this, by the way. Nobody was killed, but there was a strike immediately after this. It didn't seem like it lowered the risk of escalation. It seemed like it increased the risk of escalation because you basically attacked somebody else. It's as if it's saying, we are going to attack this. And in the context of tit for tat, we have no expectation that you're going to respond. So the attack itself is to get across how serious we are to prevent you and to limit you from coming after us. This is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. I mean, but this is the argument that they're making. Why are we there? First, should we be there? Second, is it legal to be there? Third, are we breaching international law in the context of these attacks? And the law and the domestic law and the ruling and everything else is just when that people are saying to themselves, we are, in reality of things, in another country, firing missiles in that other country. We shouldn't be there. It is not wanted for us to be there, nor whatever fig leaf of law that we're using to be there. The reality of things. It's time for us to leave and get out. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Back in a moment.
Fault Lines. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We give you the most essential information out there. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Stuck in traffic? No problem. Stay informed. Stay tuned to Radio Sputnik on 105.5 FM or 1390 AM in the Washington, D.C. area. Need more? Follow us on Facebook or check us out on SputnikNews.com.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my invisible co-host. He's not here. Shane is not necessarily feeling well. He'll be back soon. But I am here. And if you guys live in the area, you can catch me on the radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM in this area, in the D.C. area. We're also in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging with Shane and what Shane is typically here. I know this sounds a little stilted, but basically, if you're in the area, you love this content, you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with a chat, a tweet, and you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make the show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. I am excited to have this conversation that is coming up because I am entirely fascinated by what is taking place from the standpoint of the mechanics behind the scenes. And if you guys have listened to me over the weekend, if you guys have watched this channel or watched this network, you know what I am talking about. I am talking about the UFO report that was released by the Office of Director of National Intelligence. And it's not just the Office of Director of National Intelligence. The report is prepared with, right here, Congressional Intelligence and Armed Services Committees, UAT Task Force, and Office of Director of National Intelligence Manager for Aviation drafted a report with input from the USDI, DIA, FBI, NRO, NGA, NSA, Air Force, Army, Navy, ONI, DARPA, FAA, NOAA, NGAAOD. Basically, the alphabet soup of agencies are standing by the report and say, yes, this is real. This is legit. This is credible. You then have Rubio coming out saying, this report confirms that the advanced tech that our pilots have been reporting for over the course of X number of years is real, and we need to start taking it seriously. Then you immediately have the Department of Defense, Secretary of Defense, who, by the way, has a lot of explaining to do, comes out and basically creates an X-Files division A recent report from the Office of Director of National Intelligence highlights the current challenges associated with assessing unidentified aerial phenomena occurring on or near Department of Defense training ranges and installations. Pursuant to that, we need to get more data. We need to establish procedures to synchronize collection, reporting, and analysis on the UAP problem set, and to establish recommendations for securing military test and training ranges, identify requirements for establishment of operations of new activity to include organizational alignment, resources, staffing required, as well as any necessary authorities and timelines for implementation, be developed in coordination with the principal staff assistants, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, secretaries of military departments, and commanders and combatants of commands of the DNI. Basically, we are formalizing the information collection and sharing process among all of these institutions, and that the people who were inhibited because of either ridicule, inhibited because of sociocultural, that needs to go away. We need to collect this information and do it as soon as possible. The document is phenomenal. The document is amazing because what the document does is say this issue is real. This is credible. Our pilots have been encountering technology that supersedes our own. And the people who've been looking at the classified documents have been coming out and saying so. I am eager to have this conversation with Mike Maloof. And the reason is because Mike Maloof is not a UFO guy. I want to know the mechanics of what is going on behind the scenes as this 180 is taking place. So joining us to discuss is Mike Maloof. He's former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author and regular contributing analysis to RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service in the U.S. Department of Defense. Mike, thank you for joining me on this. I really appreciate it.
Well, good morning. Good morning.
So when this report came out, what were your thoughts? I mean, like I said, I know you're not a UFO guy. Well, at least I don't think you are. And let me
I'm an EMP guy. I'm an EMP guy, not a UFO guy. But I understand where you're coming from.
Right. Right. Like there's some people who are in. It's almost like porn in a weird way. You would have porn stars, and it's like, well, the person is a star, but you're adding porn into it, meaning I know it's something different, right? It's like, yes, it's movies, yes, it's something different. It's kind of like the UFO community is like that, where you have people who study it for all of those years, but because it wasn't solidified in regards to the way that government and media, it was something different. It was different track. And now you have this kind of weird thing where these things collide on some level.
Well, it's taken on a more serious bent now because a lot of these incidences that were actually seen by actual Navy pilots occurred over military installations and military aircraft carriers, and they can't explain what they are. Now, they are UFOs or unidentified flying objects or unidentified aerial phenomena, which does not necessarily mean that they are extraterrestrial.
Correct.
Or they're not the ET stuff. They just are things that we can't knowingly identify readily what they are.
Exactly.
And that's why it has taken on a much more serious tone.
But see that right there, just that part alone though, that's new. Like
yes.
because if you really think about it, over the course of the last 70 years, the government has taken explicit steps to say this isn't real. And all at once, in this brimming report that basically says, not only is it real, we need more resources to study. We're not configured to figure it out. We need to be able to come up with experiments. And the socioeconomic culture of people not being willing to report because they didn't want to be labeled crazy or lose their rank or get ridiculed, that has inhibited scientific progress in understanding what it is. So I guess my thing is, it's not about people coming out saying they're aliens. It's more so coming out saying, let's establish that there's a there and proceed from there. It's that. That's new.
Yeah. And it's the fact that you have these what appear to be concerns by very responsible people.
Right.
It isn't quackos or anything like that or wackos. It's people who have held very responsible positions and active duty personnel who cite these things and see physical activities that cannot be explained under the current technological phenomena that we have today. Now, that said, it could be a series of things. It could be light activities or false sensor readings, or that could actually be aircraft or something that's being tested that from another country that we don't know about. And the fact that the Department of Defense is now taking it seriously sort of implies that it's not necessarily coming from us.
Exactly. That's the catch.
You see, we used to talk about Area 51.
Exactly.
Well, if the Department of Defense is taking it seriously now, then and we cannot explain it, then something else is awry.
Because you would have to. I mean, they would have to be idiots, and I don't think they are. Because they have to. I would imagine they say, okay, let's eliminate what we don't think it is. Meaning, okay, that's swamp gas. That's, a drone. That's a bird. That's whatever. And then you get to these cases where it's like, okay, multiple sensors have picked this up. Like also sensors from ships, airplane, all this stuff. We have footage, the works. And the pallets, multiple pallets are seeing it at once. So that it's like, so it was like, okay, how do we explain that? It becomes that. And then you get Congress members. Let's play this clip for the moment. This is Romney being asked about this because Rubio's statement was basically, these pallets have been saying this for years. This is real. And then you have Bill Nelson, NASA. I've seen the classified documents. I don't think we're alone. These guys are coming out saying this straight out. Rubio has been very clear too. Listen to Romney for a moment. Let's play Romney's clip.
Intelligence just a few days ago released a new report on 144 sightings of what they call unidentified aerial phenomena. Virtually all of them remain unexplained. Whatever these are, they appear to not only be technology that the United States does not have, but technology that we cannot even explain. I know a lot of people joke about this, but you're a national security hawk. How concerned are you about these objects, and where do you think they come from?
Well, I don't believe they're coming from foreign adversaries. If they were, why, that would suggest that they have a technology which is in a whole different sphere than anything we understand. And frankly, China and Russia just aren't there.
Let's stop there. Let's stop there for a moment. Because I keep saying, at the end of that statement, the world should have stopped. Like Mitt Romney is talking about stuff that he's seen. Rubio is talking about stuff that he's seen. Ratcliffe is talking about stuff that he's seen. Elizondo is talking about stuff that he's seen. Brennan and these guys, they're not talking about it in this conceptual way. And Romney is like, no, I'm not worried because I don't think it's from China and Russia. What? What did you just say? That's profound. And let's do one more clip. Let's go Ratcliffe. Listen to Ratcliffe for a moment. Ratcliffe goes further.
Look, the bottom line is with unidentified aerial phenomenon, many cases, Dan, we're able to explain it away for reasons like visual disturbances or weather phenomenon or foreign adversaries and their technologies, or even our own experimental technologies with certain aircraft and vehicles. But what this report really underscores, Dan, is that that there are a number of instances, and the specific number remains classified, but a number of instances where we've ruled all of that out. And there are technologies that we don't have, and frankly, that we're not capable of defending against based on those things that we've seen, multiple
Let's
sensors.
Stop right there for a moment.
In other words, we're not just people.
The Department of Defense has a lot of explaining to do. Now, part of that is if they need to explain to us what country they believe jumped us in technology, they need to explain the track that the country took in order to do so. On some level, you need to explain the technology itself. How long has it been hanging around our military installations without anything being done about it? Has there been countermeasures? Was the president told? Was Congress told? I mean, there's a lot of questions that come along with this. And that people haven't got there yet. People are still at the, oh my God, stamp. It's like the, whoa, what does this mean standpoint? What are the mechanics of things that are taking place in the Department of Defense here? I'm fascinated by that. Because this is a flip, like nobody's business. And so how are they mechanically grappling and dealing with this as it moves forward?
Well, they're going to have to, they've created a new office to deal with this very thing, which, as I said earlier, implies that that it is serious, it is a potential threat, and it also includes elements that they can't explain. So you're going to incorporate the likes of Space Force and Air Force and all aviation assets to come to grips with this thing and try to nail it down as to just what it is. And until they get some additional sightings and what have you, they're not going to be able to go beyond what they've already done. I would imagine that as you pointed out earlier, that they have reversed themselves. They're taking this much more seriously now. It doesn't. I don't know if Romney's hiding something or he just doesn't know, but you can't rule out anything that might suggest trying a new technology out. For example, stealth. No one knew about stealth until the F-117 appeared on the scene over Bosnia, hardly. And there could be similar things underway right now that we don't know about. But what's happening is that what they've seen so far is defying the physics that and the technologies that they know that do exist, and that's what they don't understand.
But that's the
now. It could
part.
Be light. Light travels. You do a reflection on something, and zoop, and it goes in weird directions. It could be a reflection. Who knows?
Well,
but they need to understand that.
But they're talking about tech. I mean, like our pilots would have to be idiots. I mean, because we're talking about people, multiple pilots at once engaging it.
Well, that's what has made this much more serious.
Yeah,
because you have active duty personnel are saying, "What in the world was that?"
Yeah,
they've actually recorded it.
I guess what I'm getting at is, if you were in the Department of Defense right now, and this came out, and it says, okay, there's something in our military bases. This is real. And there are certain responsibilities that you would imagine have to take place now, right? I mean, because you can't say something has been invading our military bases and we don't know what it is and stop there. You can't do that. And so it becomes, okay, well, how do you protect your military bases? And it's not even that it's a threat per se, because nobody's been fired upon anything like that. And also like, okay, we're grappling with it. But what I'm trying to get at the mechanic, like what happens or what are they going to do to grapple with it behind the scenes? And even what is the conversation that takes place where it changes from this is not real to it's real? Like, I'm trying to figure out why is this happening now? That's what I guess I'm trying to get at. What would make this to be something relevant now? Because they've always had this information.
It's the fact that all of a sudden we had an aircraft carrier recently that was buzzed by all kinds of activity above it, and it caught them totally by surprise. We've got some of the best and most sensitive sensors in the world, and it didn't pick them up until they were hovering right over aircraft carriers that were in operational mode.
USS Kidd, USS Raphael.
They couldn't identify it.
Yeah, USS Kidd, Raphael. When you were in military, did you get these type of stories come up, or no. It's just kind of nobody just talks about this stuff?
I did something entirely different. We were involved in high tech, but my job was to stop it from going wayward on dual use technologies under export controls, and my job was to stop diversions.
Very interesting. Okay.
Of real stuff that we could identify.
Yeah, right. That you could pick out of the sky. So, and like I told people, I'm not shocked if a quirk of physics is uncovered. I wouldn't be shocked by that. Like let's say if somebody found this kind of quirk where, okay, we can manipulate gravity using electricity. Great. And what does that look like in a ship? That's not going to look like anything that we're using. I mean, even the shape of the craft may go into just the operational use of the craft. And so it's like it has to look weird in order for it to even do what it do for the physics to work. Like it could be something like that. That wouldn't blow me away, especially where our technology is now. I think that the difficult problem has to do with, but what about the 80s? The 90s is that part.
It just never came up, although people were watching it and they were saying a lot of these activities were occurring during that period of time, but they were never taken very, very seriously. It was put down, and that's ultimately why a former senator actually called for the creation of such a review, and then Rubio is the one who actually introduced the legislation to do this, because there have been consistently increasing reports by very responsible people, and you cannot ignore that, especially when they're observed over military platforms that would pose a threat if it were actually positively identified from another country.
Yes, and we let that ride for decades. That's the point that Rubio is making. Like Rubio, because
yes,
the fact of the matter is, if the moment that you say it's real, it doesn't become real just today. It goes back in time.
The phenomena is real. Yeah, the phenomena.
The phenomena becomes real.
Yeah, you know, this could have been circumstances that have occurred before our country was ever even conceived of. It could have. This may have led to the mythologies of old.
Agreed.
A long time ago.
But isn't that wild though?
So,
because think about what we're saying for the moment. It's like we are having this conversation about, okay, our paradigm has just shifted in some way. Like it's because it's not so much that we know these are aliens. That almost honestly is less relevant to the fact that there's a question that we don't know an answer to as a world.
Correct.
As a world. And it's like that stuff is being put to the question immediately. And so it's like, okay, what is it? And the fact is we don't know. And the fact that we don't know is exciting on some level. It puts you back in the mindset of like NASA, where people were looking up into space like, oh my God, we're going to be the Jetsons and stuff like that. It's phenomenal. It's this question that should be answered and investigated.
It's to find the level of science as we know it today. It would be almost tantamount to some superstition that could not be explained, and they blamed it on the gods or something like that. We're at that stage now from a technological standpoint. We don't understand what this is. However, reasonable minds have taken over and said, okay, let's get serious and try to figure this out.
Isn't that exciting? Yeah. Like, because it's not like, okay, God comes back in this. It's not that.
I can tell you're excited.
Well, yeah, because I consider it, to me, there's a scientific mystery that we're acknowledging as a planet. It's that.
Yes, and we're no longer saying it's the gods or something like that that's doing it. There's something out there that we cannot explain scientifically, and we need to get to the bottom of it.
And our government has just said this is a true thing. And so at that point, it becomes, okay, well, what is it? Now we need to figure out what it is. And I think that's exciting. Yeah. That is something that our world is grappling with what we don't know. And it's just weird and heady, because now the conversations we're having, like 5 years ago, it'd be like you guys are talking about well, no, the paradigm is on some level shifted. We don't know what it is. And so it becomes this investigation. Let me ask you this. What do you think happens from here? Rubio's calling for congressional investigations. I mean, you heard Romney. Basically, Romney is so funny on this, because Romney is like, well, it's not China and Russia, so, I'm good.
I think it was E.T. that landed out in his neighborhood a long time ago in that movie, right?
Right. And maybe. That's right, Nevada. Oh no, he was in Utah. Romney's Utah. Mormons. But what do you think happens from here? I mean, it seems like congressional investigations have to take place. You can't just have a report that just stops there.
Well, I think as long as they've created an office in the Department of Defense on this thing, it's clearly that it's another requirement now that has gone out due to congressional and also potential threats. Now, is it a technology that let's say China or even Russia has developed that we're not aware of? Consider this, that it was during a visit by Bob Gates in China when he was the Secretary of Defense a number of years ago, that he saw for the first time the J-20 Chinese stealth aircraft. Intelligence never told him that such a thing even existed.
Wow.
So and here that told him the extent to which the Chinese had advanced in stealth technologies. And we did not know that.
I mean, look,
and that created a real firestorm. I can tell you, I was at the Defense Department at the time, and that created a real firestorm in the intelligence community as part of intelligence failure.
Now, what was their response to something like that? I'm curious. Like, you find out, okay, we didn't know this. We were in the dark. But I would just make a point
that tangible, something that tangible, just like the 1998 detonation of the Indian nuclear bomb. We had no idea.
Wow.
So, they have to go back and say, why wasn't our intelligence good? Where did we mess up? It really goes in for, they really have to reflect upon that. They really have to do an internal review of just where they missed it and go back and look at old intelligence. And this is something that they didn't pick up on. I mean, it requires extensive tearing apart and rebuilding to try to figure out what went wrong.
That's
because we can't be doing this. It can't be missing stuff like this. And now that you have actual radar images of things, objects, unidentified phenomena over our military assets, and we can't do anything about it, is alarming, because that may mean that something could be happening. There could be probes of something even greater that could be coming down the line. We don't know yet, and I think that's why they're now taking it seriously to look at to start focusing on this thing and get rid of all the little superstitions and the little pointed hat concepts and tin hat concepts, and take this seriously now, because it has now come up in various serious channels that cannot be explained, and that's not good if you're charged with the defense of the country.
Yeah,
and because this could be something even greater that we don't know about. As I said, it could be something that it can go from a reflection of something to a probing by phenomena that is beyond our knowledge.
And either way, we need to get to the bottom of it.
Technology levels.
Yeah, and either way, I think
the bottom of it.
Yeah, it behooves us as a country, as a world, to get to the bottom of it. I mean, that's the wild part of it, because it's not just us as a country on some level. I mean, it's invading our airspace, but it's not just our airspace.
We're going to go to other countries now and get their assistance as well, and get what they're hearing, and get their input, and see how seriously they're taking it, because they undoubtedly have picked up stuff as well.
Yeah.
So we need. I know that this directive will require them now to go on out and check with allies and get other similar stories to see if anything can be identified in any way, shape, or form.
Well, apparently during Glassnose, the books, especially from the UFO stuff, was open, and they were having similar issues with UFOs as we were. Meaning, like, it doesn't seem to be just specific to us, and then it becomes like, what does it?
It's not just us; it affects others.
I guess
they have sightings everywhere.
Yeah, right. It's all over the place. And okay, so now, they're probably going to be hearings. They're probably going to be what happens next. Like they're basically are going to try to separate the wheat from the chaff. That's what it seems like has to take place, because they have to discern who's the.
We'll have to go through. We'll go to the Brits, for example, through their intel channels and what have you, and say, what do you guys got? What have you seen? And I think the fact that we're taking it so much more seriously now than we did, let's say, 10 years ago, they're going to be doing it as well, because I'm sure undoubtedly they've had similar things, and they've just sort of scooted it in the back drawer somewhere and saying, well, it's something that we don't quite understand, so we're just going to tuck it away somewhere.
Well, that's interesting.
But unless it's a real threat.
So do you think, okay, that's interesting. So do you think there's a world correlation of data? Meaning, like,
there's going to have.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was going to say there will have to be, and the fact that we are now taking it this seriously, it's going to prompt other countries that are, in an advanced technological stage. We may even go to other countries that are less developed and say, "What are you seeing?" Because they may see things that might help fill some gaps somewhere. Who knows? Right now, it just looks like, if you look at the images, they are of particular shapes. They're either round or triangular in shape, or just like a bullet shape.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing unusual, but the movements are different, which suggests to me that it's like a light reflection or a sensor that. Especially against the clouds and what have you. It's something else is causing that. And you can be surprised sometimes. A reflection from one thing off of a cloud you can actually see it. And it might be what they see, but in terms of radar pickup, they've actually picked up something tangible if it's on the radar. So something is out there that they cannot explain, and that's what they got to get to the bottom of, especially when it's hovering over military assets.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is just one. This is less than like 10 years. They constrained the reporting. In fact, they constrained it to the items that were the weirder aspects, meaning they tried to eliminate the other stuff, and they just basically said, "All right, we can't explain these, and this is not
exactly."
interdimensional fish. This is not like, this is something that our sensors and people, all of us, were picking up. It's that stuff. And so
it's not by a bunch of wackos.
No, these are like serious people,
operational people.
Yeah, serious operational people, and many of them, like not just one or two, like several people coming out. I really appreciate you talking to me about this, because I was very curious on how were they dealing with this behind the scenes in regards to the switchover, and how now that this has become real, like the mechanisms that are going to have to basically kick in gear because it's real. It's that stuff.
Well, it's going to also have to look at what's the operational priorities right now. Right now, we're still going to be keeping the priorities will be on what's happening in the real world. You got the Black Sea episodes, the military maneuvers. Those are going to be the priorities. Space and unidentified phenomena, aerial phenomena. It's probably not going to have the highest priority, but it will have some priority now because of the lingering of these assets around military facilities and aircraft. They seem to dwell around our military assets, particularly ships.
Yeah.
And that's what cannot be explained, and that's what's really worrisome.
Well, I mean, apparently some of the video and the footage gets it, like they would never show it to us in a way that makes it so clear and so definitive that they can't backstep whatever they show. Meaning,
remember, this is the unclassified version.
Right, this is the unclassified stuff.
Classified.
Right.
So what does the classified say? That it must tell us more.
Exactly. I really want somebody to pull a Mike Gravel and just go out there and just read it on the floor of the Congress. just do it. Just do it. This is for the best interest of the world.
That would be illegal.
Well, you can do. I mean, you can. Well, yes, but there are loopholes of making that work, right? Like going through committee and stuff like that. The president requests that you don't do it, but that type of pushback and all.
Well, I don't see why they just don't
release it,
unclass everything.
Yeah.
Just release it. What's the point? What's the problem?
Well,
what methods, sources and methods are we trying to protect at this point? The means of sensor detection?
I don't think it's that.
Okay, you can take that out. You can take that. You can take out that kind of stuff. The fact that we have the ability even to pick this up. Okay, we know that. Now we got to find out what's in the classified version, because that has gone unsaid.
See, I think the issue is not so much that they can't show you. I mean, they can show you if they wanted to. The issue is more so you're stuck with whatever you get. Meaning, because this is now physical matter reality. Like whatever happens, this is no longer conceptual. Like this is no longer a fight over, okay, is it real? Whatever they show, however the public responds, however the political space responds, however science responds, however any of this stuff responds, and technology that spawned from it, the results of it, meaning whether we kill ourselves as a result of the technology, whether people freak out, like they're stuck with it. We're stuck with all of it, right? It's no longer like a movie. Like it's like, okay, the people in that movie reacted this way when they found out. It's not that. It's us. And so it's like, how do people respond if they're given something that dramatically changes their paradigm instantly? Physics, religion, science, all of it. And do you want them to throw that into the public without the public being desensitized to it? I think it's that more than anything else. I could be wrong. But and tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, is it not that much thought that goes into it? I'm thinking about it too much.
No, I think that these are things that thoughtful people are going to think about. And again, I think that the fact that there's still information that's classified, that's what's worrisome to me. Why are they keeping stuff classified?
What do you mean?
And
Explain.
That's what I think needs to be revealed.
You said that's worrying.
It means that they know something more than what they're actually telling us. I think that's what it implies.
Yeah.
Why would you classify something like that and have the unclassed version and only, but have an unclassed version, but still have classified version?
I see.
What's in the classified version that is so sensitive that you cannot reveal it?
Meaning, why tell us that you know something that we don't know? Like, why even tell us that?
Hiding?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it something that they don't want to alarm us about? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's the catch with
it's the unknown of the unknown, you know.
Yeah, that's the catch with the classified version. I mean, I felt that way when the Navy came on and said, "Okay, we're going to be creating a platform for people to give us their stories about UFOs when it happens." But no, we're not going to tell you about what happens. It's like, what? Why are you telling me that you're not going to tell me that? It's just very strange. Mike, thank you for talking to me about this. I really appreciate this. Mike Maloof is
my pleasure.
Former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author and regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service in the United States Department of Defense. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be taking calls coming up in a moment.
Fault Lines.
Epidemics and pandemics could kill millions of people, and they actually did. Centuries ago, deadly outbreaks called the Black Death, the Plague of Justinian, and the Spanish flu ravaged countries, empires, and whole continents. Some of these diseases are still present around the globe. Others have become a thing of the past. Discover how these ancient and not-so-distant outbreaks from previous centuries differ from modern-day SARS, MERS, and coronavirus pandemics. Listen to our new series, Outbreak, the deadliest epidemics in human history. This week on Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. Typically, Shane is sitting here, but he should be back either tomorrow or the day after. He's not feeling that well today. We've come to the end. We've come to the wrap. We're going to accept your phone calls, or I am going to accept your phone calls. 804, what is this? 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. You can talk about basically whatever we talked about today or whatever's on your mind. Let me make sure we have Dave in Ohio. Dave, what's going on?
So, in the early parts of the report, the specific word disruptive is used. And, reading that along with its context, I think that disruptive is being used in the terms of like how we would describe something disruptive in industry or market.
Yes.
The meaning of that is that the former dominant actors can no longer compete.
Well, I think it means in two places. I think it's militaristic and, yes, disruptive in a sense of technology. But I think they're talking about disruptive in a sense of, let's say, situational awareness, technological edge, that type of stuff. Like for example, right here, including in 18 incidents described in 21 reports, observers reported unusual UAP movement patterns or flight characteristics. Some UAP appeared to remain stationary when afloat, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speeds without discernible means of propulsion. In a small number of cases, military aircraft systems process radio frequency energy associated with the UAP sightings. And then it goes into basically saying, the UAP task force holds a small amount of data that appeared to show UAP demonstrating acceleration or a degree of signature management. Additional rigorous analysis are necessary, but multiple teams or groups of technical experts to determine the nature and validity of this data. And I mean, they're basically making a point of saying, look, there are things that we don't know how that works. And I would make the point, it's not just the report. It's the stuff that's around the report, meaning when Elizondo is talking, or when Congress members that seen the classified report are talking. Like, they are talking about stuff. Here's another one where they're basically saying that, look, some of this stuff if it's legitimately what we think it is, meaning if it is technology, it would be disruptive. Yes, I agree with you from the standpoint of the capability, but I think they're meaning militaristic capability. This is doing something that our craft can't do. We can't compete militaristically.
Yeah, that's entirely my point here, is that, this isn't in context of industry. This is in context of intelligence and national security, and they're specifically using the word disruptive. And I feel like that point has been underplayed a little bit.
So right here, it says UAP clearly pose a flight issue and may pose a challenge to U.S. national security. May pose that's a big, what is the intent of swamp gas, right? Swamp gas doesn't have an intent. No, they're not talking about that. Right here. Safety concerns primarily center on aviators contending with increasingly cluttered air demand. UAP would represent a national security challenge if they are a foreign adversary collection platform or provide evidence a potential adversary has developed either a breakthrough or disruptive technology. Think about that. What does a breakthrough technology mean? What does that mean?
Right.
Like, that's like, when you think about that, does gravity manipulation? Is that what they mean? Like some of the stuff that you're talking about is astonishing, right? I mean, the fact that this is in this report. But Dave, thank you, man. Thank you for the call. Shelly in Michigan. Shelly, what's going on?
Hey, so this is going to sound a little crazy, but we're talking about like aliens and the unexplained and unexplained technologies.
Actually, we're just talking about there's something in our skies that we don't know what it is. Because honestly, I don't even need to jump to what it is. I just need to nail down that there's a there there. That's all I need. Because the other stuff falls, and we can have to fight over about what it is and everything else. But that stuff is stuff where they're going to try to eliminate, the actors. But the thing is, the moment that you say, okay, this is real, it has been real, then there is 70 years of history that come along with this that is now all of a sudden get brought into context. And not just that, you're stuck with this notion of, okay, there's certain logical consequences of saying it's real. Is it us or is it not us? And if they're saying it's not the United States, then they logically know that there are, there are things that come along with that in regards to explanations of, okay, how did this happen? What was the pathway that they jumped us? I mean, we're talking about breakthrough. What's the breakthrough? Like, all of that stuff, falls out of it. So just me being at the point of saying there's a there, and it needs to be investigated further, I am good with that. I'm on a moon with that. That's where I'm at. I don't need to go further than I can defend. That's my point. It's just we're in a different place. I'm sorry, Shelley, please.
Oh, no, I just, the space mystery and having that answered is just huge because, there's still things on our planet we don't understand. Right. We still can't explain how the mind works to the point that we can explain why this does what or what the bottom of the ocean floor looks like completely. Those sound like really small mysteries in everything, but it's a huge thing to accomplish one of them because I know, what is out there, aliens, no aliens, has been a huge question.
Well, see, I think, and I agree with you on this, right? It's kind of like what I was telling Mike. Is the U.S. going to work with other countries to see what they know now that the U.S. has said this is real? And you would think that they kind of have to, right? I mean, you represent 5% of the globe. Certainly you need to, what does China have? What does Russia have? What does Brazil have? Et cetera. They even have kind of this idea of context. And so it's almost like it forces you to do this stuff on a global way. And you're right. It puts the question, what is it? It's just the question. It's like staring you in the face on some level. What is it? And the military is like, okay, we have no idea. Okay, fair enough. I take you at your word. You don't know. Are you going to investigate? Well, yeah, we have to investigate because it's in our sensitive military installations. Okay, great. It's real. What is it? And it's that. That question is monstrous. And, it's one of those things where whether you are in the UFO stuff, whether you're in the military, whether you're just a person who said, hey, that's a big deal. What is that? It's still the question that haunts. That's what I mean. I can find solidarity with people who just want to know what it is and can honestly look at it what it is. If it comes back and says, okay, it's secret tech that we had for X number of years. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. But I want to be able to know that. Or at the very least, I want something investigating that to make that point. But what I have right now is Mitt Romney saying it's not Russia and China. I have the head of NASA basically saying he doesn't think we're alone based on evidence. I have Marco Rubio basically validating the pilots over the years who basically talked about advanced tech. I have Dan Ratcliffe coming out basically saying there's a lot of stuff in our skies. We've eliminated us. We've eliminated other people's tech. We don't think it's Russia and China. It's something else. So it's like you have your main political leaders. I mean, these people aren't, these people are mainstream political actors who are saying, okay, there's something here that we need to investigate. I don't know, man. I was floored by it, and I continue to be floored by it because it feels like this world is just now different. What do you think, Shelley? I mean, am I overblowing this? Or is that question really is as monstrous and as fantastic as I think it is? Oh, Shelley's gone. Okay, good. All right. Well, Look, Shelley, thank you for your call. Dave, thank you for your call. I agree with both of you on some level. It's a very interesting scenario that we have at our disposal going forward. The catch is we're scientists. We're looking for scientists. And like I said, I've invited scientists on this show to have a conversation about it. And before the report came out, you would have people who would be like, yeah, that's okay. I don't buy it. And it's like, okay, but what are you using to not buy it? I am using my years of science. Oh, so nothing. So nothing. You don't buy it because of your religious beliefs. And that's basically where it is. At this point, though, I don't necessarily know how the religious beliefs can supersede reality. This is the thing that scientists always tell us, right? I don't care about your feelings. I care about the experiment. In this very specific case, an experiment seems, on some level, to have taken place, even if the experiment is only in the legitimizing aspect or capability of government. And in that case, I have been begging scientists to be more overt in their research of this, and their want to research this, to get more curious, to want to have an answer to a question. Nobody is telling them to go out screaming they're aliens. What people are going out is saying, do your job being investigation, unless you're going to leave this entirely up to the auspices and purview of government. I'm going to end it here. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. I want to give a shout out to my engineer. I want to give a shout out to my producer. I want to tell my co-host, Feel Better Bro. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan.